You asked for funny. You asked for funny.
See, everybody thinks it needs to be all commando, man. I'm telling you, some of the funniest stories are the simplest shit you can imagine.
Oh yeah.
Was there any other classic ones you got on your mind?
Like even I don't know if you guys were, but like talking just well, I think we were laughing at you, Gilly, when you were pinned down in front of the doorway. And
yeah, I mean, because that's fucking comical, Bob. But yeah, that's super comical. I know. I loved it too. Me being pinned down by an automatic fucking weapon in front of a door. Yeah, it was awesome.
But you know, these guys, I don't know if they were laughing up you know, initially, because I mean it was they, fucking dude was rocking it from like basically the hallway of the house.
Yeah.
They were gonna make entry in the front door. I don't know why we weren't up there at that point, but you know, when everything kind of settles down, you're laughing at these three. Was it 3 guys or 4 guys up there?
I think it was 3 of us. Yeah.
But I mean, they're pinned down like behind this little teeny mound. So they're all hunkered down. They're trying to get as small as they can. And we're back there, you know, laughing on the radio saying, yeah, just, you know, just hang tight. We'll figure this out.
Get small, fellas, get small.
But that, like that stuff happens all the time. Were you guys on the cave hit when we had the 2 guys in the cave and we took contact and I went right, not gonna say his name, but the other guy went left and he got pinned down behind that fucking rock.
Yeah.
And he's right in front of this cave, pinned down behind this fucking rock that's about as size of him. You know, and yeah, he was stuck there for probably.
That was on that big mountain, right?
Yeah.
We burnt.
Like the whole time that he would move and like he would try to get behind the rock and like get to us, and they would open up on him. And every time they opened up on him, we'd be like, "Yeah, just hang tight." And he's like getting as small as he can to stay behind this fucking rock.
Wasn't that when we fragged the cave?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. And then he came running out and went fucking tumbling down that mountain like a fucking.
It was 2 guys.
What was it? Usain. What's his name? Usain Bolt. Yeah.
What's that?
So you throw a couple of frag grenades into the cave, and then 2 guys come running out and fall down a mountainside.
Oh my God!
We all tuned them up.
Yeah,
and
his body went down.
So as they were coming out, I'm shooting at them basically upside down on motherfuckers.
Yeah,
and I think one of our other guys, one of the snipers, had gone up to a mountaintop in front of the cave. So when the guys actually started coming out, everyone unleashed on the dudes. But yeah, it was comical as they're dead. So it's just dead bodies going down this fucking mountainside. And we're like, oh, that's fucking funny. Until it was done, and we're like, ah, shit, we need to go.
We gotta go look at the body.
We need to go fucking search him. So it's like, all right, who's gonna go down this motherfucker and search these guys?
Damn, these stories are fucking epic. I do have a question. Well, you got another one you want to share? I'm all ears.
Well,
no, I'm just saying, no.
Over 1,000 stories like that, you know.
That's crazy.
So this is a little bit more of a not a common one, but a serious one. I interviewed a guy a while ago named Chris Van Zant who was in Delta.
Chris!
Yeah, so did you serve with him?
I did. I was in C Squadron with him for a while. Yeah, great dude.
Yeah, great dude. And I was talking to him about like, why do you read all these stories about like you got Green Berets who get in trouble, you got SEALs that get in trouble, but you don't ever read stories about Delta hitting the news. And he said, like, if you are a fucking idiot, you're just gone essentially. And so I'm curious, like, what's your opinion of like why you see all these other issues in other units, but you Delta, it's not really something that it seems to be an issue whatsoever.
I think it's, there's 2 components to it, right? Like when you get to that level, the selection process is a lot better and dudes do get booted real quick, right? Like I think 6 guys that I graduated our training course with went to D Squadron, and 2 years later, I think there was only 3 of us left, right? But the other part is like Green Berets and Navy SEALs are really big organizations, right? I mean, easily, tens if hundreds, not hundreds of times bigger than the unit, right? So if you've got 100 operators deployed throughout the world, and you've got, 3,000 or 4,000 special forces dudes deployed, you're going to have more trouble with those guys. There's just more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But here, let me fill you in on a secret though. We have our own issues, right? Like every single unit out there. All right. But what I do think,
don't let the booze talk, Gilly.
no. But hey, we got issues just like we got to fire dudes just like everybody else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
Well,
But-
let me ask about if a guy comes in and he's made it through selection and then it's OTC, right? Operators training course they go to, and then that's when you get through that. Now you're in. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well,
Yeah, but
you're
you're
in.
never in.
Selection's ongoing.
So if a guy gets to the unit and 6 months in, he turns out to be a major problem, or he's just, it's not so much he doesn't mesh well, but he's a problem. Is it like a football team where it's just handled internally in the locker room, or is it more like get this guy the fuck out of here? We don't want to be around this guy.
Both.
So
It's
yeah,
both.
we had that on our team. We had it. We had an issue like that. And when I took over the team, I had to do a little bit of backtracking a little bit because some things weren't done, correctly, I guess 100% the first time around. But I had to fire a guy. And that was because this kid had all the great operator skills, great individual operator skills. He was a good shooter. He could do CQB well, right? But he could not fucking mesh with the team. He just couldn't. And he was like a caustic disease on the team. And it just turned out where I just had to, I tried him out in a different position and it didn't work. And I had to bring him back and I had to get rid of him.
So, when guys leave Delta, do they just go back to the unit they came from then?
Yeah, so a lot of, if he was SF, he could go back to SF, he could go back to Ranger Battalion, wherever. Yeah. I mean, they try to give him, they try to hook him up because they did do a service and they put all their effort into this. So they try to give them, their assignment they want, but yeah, they could go back
to answer your question on that. It is initially dealt with internally. And then if that doesn't work, then yes, you're like, get the fuck out. So, I mean,
and I'll say that, the unit has much more levity with that stuff than other places, right? Like, so I came from Ranger Battalion, right? And there's, the code of conduct for, the 75th Ranger Regiment. There's certain standards in there. If you break those, you'll be released from the 75th Ranger Regiment. Now, if the kid doesn't break those, but he's just an asshole or an idiot or whatever, you can't get rid of him. And I'm pretty sure it's the same way with Special Forces. There's been plenty of dudes that have left the unit because their personality just it wasn't a good fit in the locker room.
There's the night I got shot, I shouldn't have walked out of that one alive. It's that one's a long story. I'll try to give you
dig in.
And I'll try to give you and again it's a unit story, so I'll make it unfortunately somewhat vague. But the backside of the story still remains, is we were going after a very, very high target individual, and the way we wanted to go after him, we were told that we were going to go tonight and for these reasons, and we basically told him, hey, there's a smarter way to do business. We trust us. This is what we do. We'll hit them tomorrow, and under the circumstances that we want. And they basically said, that's fine. Then we'll send the Rangers. And we basically got together and we're like, people are going to die tonight if the Rangers go. And that's not knocking the Rangers. The Rangers are great dudes. But at the end of the day, they're not us. And this, when you do this job long enough, you know when you get a warning order, if this is going to be, one of those missions or not. And this was just going to be one of those missions. Everything was difficult about the target. There was no good way to get in. There was a lot of them. It was going to be a nasty one, and it was. And so we basically took it to a vote, and we're like, hey, are we going to go tonight, or are we going to let the Rangers go take this one? And every person in that room raised their hand. And again, it wasn't for glory purposes. Like we truly believe we were saving guys' lives that night by us taking a bad mission that we normally would not have taken. So we take off on this target, and just everything was difficult about it. Everyone loves the movie when guys are fast roping on the target. You don't want to fast rope on the target. Let me tell you, you don't want to be 30 feet off the ground on the noisiest thing in the valley, dangling on a rope, or waiting for your turn to dangle on a rope. It is not a good feeling. It's a good way to get a helicopter shot down. It's a good way to get guys shot before they even get a chance to fight. So even though there are times it's the right call, it's not, it's rarely is it option A. We couldn't take that. And so unfortunately, this target was right in the middle of the village. So really the only good way to do it was to land outside the village and run all the way, into target, which unfortunately is going to take some time. And, the surprise is probably going to be given up. So that's what we did. We took that option. And by the time we got to target, there wasn't a single person in the inside the target house, but there was a fresh fire going. There's a lot of Taliban paper trail. So we knew someone was there. We knew the intel was right, that we knew they were there that night, that they just heard the helicopters and took off. So we had most of the assault team had a follow-on target they were going to go hit. We had reason to believe a house not too far away was a family member's house, and they were going to go do a follow-on target there. Seemed like a reasonable place for him to go. I was on what's called Squirter duty that night. Familiar with the term?
Squirter?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Squirter
when guys
control, Squirter duty.
Yeah, when they jump, but yeah, when guys start spraying out in all directions, they could be running for weapons, they could be running just to run. But yeah, you'll explain it better to the audience. For the audience.
That's exactly right. Sometimes I hear the helos and they don't exactly have a plan. They just know they don't want to be in the house. They assume the guys in those helos are coming for them. So they'll usually, like I said, it's usually not a pre-planned thing they do. They just run and they hide in a field. They hide behind trees. They hide behind rocks. Anywhere they feel like they've gone far enough, and they just kind of hunker down. So it was me, a combo guy, a couple Afghans, and a dog guy, and but I was the only operator on the detail going out, and that's usually a no-no. Even though I had other Americans with me, you really want more than one operator with you, because at the end of the day, that commo guy was a Green Beret and the dog handler was a Green Beret. But in those roles they're filling, they're not filling Green Beret roles, if you will. Their job now is to be a dog guy. Their job now is to be the world's best commo guy. So I was really the only shooter going out. And that was definitely a mistake on my part. But I didn't want to take an assaulter off the follow-on crew, and leave them short. So I didn't take another one with me. And we went around. There were several pockets of small groups of individuals hiding from us. We took care of them pretty quick. And then we hear over the radio that the second place was a dry hole. And so now that makes Squirter duty even more important, because he's here. We know he's here. We know he's somewhere. And if he's not in any of these two houses, he's probably hiding in one of these Squirter pockets. So one of the I didn't know at the time, but was going to be the second to last pocket of Squirters I come up against. They're hiding in this orchard. And I hate orchards. Orchards are the worst because you can, ISR can tell you, or whoever's giving you information can tell you how many people are in there, but it's rarely right. There's just too many places to hide. And it's people get shot up in orchards, I say fairly often, but it's not what you want. This orchard has this like half wall around this whole orchard. This orchard's about it's about half the size of a football field with a half wall that surrounds it. And we're sneaking up to this orchard, and I can see a group of them talking about 10 yards from maybe 5 yards from the half wall. And so I tell everyone, I don't know if I've ever told this story in this much detail. And I tell everyone, I said, hey, everyone stay here. I'm going to move up to this half wall. And after I throw a grenade, then I want you guys to move up online, and, and that'll kick off this assault. And I am giddy. Like, I'm already thinking this is going to be awesome. Like, the boys by the fire, when they hear this story, it's going to be amazing. And I sneak my way up to this half wall, and I'm kind of laying on my back with the half wall right here. And I get the grenade out, and I'm getting ready to chuck the grenade over this half wall. And I'm just excited. I'm like, man, this is going to be a good one. And I look over one last time to see if the guys are in their position. And this one Afghan is still kind of moving into his position. And he trips in the middle of the night. He trips and he lands. And I could hear those guys, speaking whatever language they're speaking. They're super close. And when he trips, they stop talking. It was so loud. And then I hear him running to the half wall. And as I'm standing here, their AKs are now over the half wall, just spraying everywhere. They just know there was a sound in the darkness. And I'm like, and I remember sitting there going, as they're just emptying mags with their barrels a couple feet over my face, going, just mad at the Afghan that he took this amazing moment from me. And so after they get done, spraying, I felt like I knew they were running away, but I didn't want to be wrong, and put my hand up there while they're reloading and get my hand shot holding a grenade. When I was, what felt like forever was a couple seconds, and I knew they weren't there anymore. I popped up real quick and I threw my grenade as hard as I could. Here's another thing that will surprise a lot of people. Grenades don't kill people, especially out in the open air in a field. I mean, you'll wound them and you'll piss them off, but grenades don't kill people. And they end up running away. And at this point, now I'm just super pissed off at them that they shot at our guys. I'm mad that my moment of glory was taken away by an Afghan tripping in the dark. And so I make sure that they're followed. And we haven't got jackpot yet. So I'm fairly certain he's in this group. So they end up running away about a click away, 1,000 meters away from the target location. That's normally too far for a small group to venture out from the main element. Hindsight's always 20/20. At that point, I should have called for a couple more operators to plus up and let them know that I was, going this far away from the main element. But I didn't. I was just out of anger, followed them, and at this point, I get talked on, and I get told, hey, they're in this area. And as we get really close to them, it's just the way the world works. Our comms go completely dark. We can't get a message out. We can't get a message in. So now it's just me and this small team without any comms at all, wandering around this small area that we know they're at, but we can't get any further intel of exactly where they're hiding like we kind of normally do. So there's this, and we're in this big field. The best way to describe it is there's this big bomb crater in this field. And I remember going up, looking inside it. It was a very dark night, no loom night. You know, your nods don't work as good on a no loom night. Like, your nods aren't just magic. They amplify the existing light. So a little bit of moonlight helps out your nods immensely. So it was a no moonlight, no loom night, and it was raining that night. And so, you know, they're all fogged up, no loom. I looked down there and it didn't look like anything. So we go searching around. At this point, we get a little bit of radio chatter in and out talking about, hey, where are you guys at? Hey, the helos are running out of gas. You know, they're either going to have to go all the way back and refuel and come back, which is going to take an hour, or we need you guys to hurry up and, you know, get done doing whatever you're doing and come back. And so we huddle up and I tell them, I said, hey, all right, let's go back. But before we go back, that crater, I just my spider senses, whatever it is, like, won't let me, you know, like, completely, you know, I just don't feel right. And they're like, well, what do you want to do? And I had a couple ideas. I thought about throwing a grenade in that crater. But if I was wrong and they were hiding somewhere else, I would have definitely given up our position. So I didn't want to do that. You know, right, wrong, or indifferent, you know, people can armchair this decision all they want. But my plan was, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get us up on a line, and it's called a white light blip, which means I'm just going to turn on my white light for just a split second and kind of look underneath my nods so I can absolutely rule this out. And the thought process was, if I white light blip it, maybe, you know, if they're not looking in this direction, they might see something, but, you know, chances are they don't, you know, they'll just go, did you see that? They, you know, may not have really known where we are. It's really unusual. We don't normally use white lights, you know, on nighttime operations. But like I said, I had to clear this depression and my nods just weren't good enough to do it. So I go up there and I go to white light blip it. And I could see at that point, those weren't rocks at the bottom of this depression. It was rocks and guys hiding underneath blankets. And so, and in fact, I kind of didn't even intend to see anything. I kind of was just like, well, I'm just going to, I blipped it. I started to turn away. And in my mind, it registered what I just saw. And so I came back and kept the white light on. And I said, the G-rated version is, there they are, get them. And you know, and we start shooting them. Unfortunately, I was the only one to take shots. The Afghans were more of a spectator that night, and the first guy I shot was still underneath his blanket, so he died. Didn't even know why. The second guy I transitioned over to was just kind of starting to look underneath his blanket. I had a suppressed gun at the time, but I wasn't running subsonic ammo, so you can hear it.
Right.
So between the white light and the rounds going off, I mean, he was interested to see what was going on, and so I gave him the good news. So, you know, the next guy over, he's a little bit further out underneath his blanket and starting to reach for his gun, and so I give him the same treatment his other two friends got. But every person I'm transitioning over to is a little bit closer to being up and ready. And so, you know, I send, you know, 4 to 6 rounds at each guy. But here's another thing that it's no one shoots guys twice and moves on. Like, you shoot guys until they stop, until they're no longer a threat. So, you know, everyone's getting 4 or 6. You know, the first guy got like 8 rounds. When I transition over to the last guy, he has his gun coming up, and I'm still and I just transitioned over to him, and I'm thinking he's closer to shooting me than I am him. And I pushed my gun as hard and fast as I can, threw a couple rounds his way. He went on full auto and sprayed up. The first couple rounds hit the base of my feet, kind of walking up. One of the rounds hits me right in my forearm, breaks my arm in half. And then the last round, as it turned me, it went right through the middle of my nods and broke my nods in half, and they're dangling on my face. And I spin around like 4 times and hit the ground. And I remember laying in the mud going, damn it. I knew I was going to get shot one day. I was the only guy on my team without a Purple Heart, the only guy. And I just remember going, that didn't hurt as bad as I thought it was going to hurt. And at that time, our commo guy, this all happens in a matter of 5 seconds. Our combo guy runs up and throws a grenade down into the hole, or not a hole, down into this big depression. And it, whatever it does, it probably lands beside a rock and it goes off. It doesn't hit him. But what it does is it reminds him that he has a grenade. And this happened for whatever reason on this particular rotation. Almost every time we introduced grenades, we got a grenade back. It's almost like reminding them, oh yeah, we carry these too. So he throws a grenade out of the hole and I'm laying on my back and it lands within arm's distance of me. And what saved my life was a muddy, rainy night. It sunk down into the mud. It went off a couple seconds later. It blasted my helmet off, my peltors to shred. It's got some scarring underneath my my beard. I got scars up and down my leg. But generally speaking, that mud tamped that grenade and absorbed most of that explosion. And so now I'm shot. My nods are shot off. I get hit by a grenade just a couple seconds later, and he goes to crawl out of the hole. And our commo guy, eventually fills him in with an absolute full mag. I mean, all 30 rounds into this guy, and it's over, kind of. So now he actually, gosh, almost he gets as he's crawling out, he sends out a couple like kind of security rounds and then tries to crawl out, and he hits our commo guy in the leg. And so our commo guy's shot and then kills him. I'm shot. I have no nods. I have an arm that to get to that point, we jumped a lot of walls trying to make a straight line to this point. Now I can't jump walls. I got a oh gosh, can't believe I'm forgetting these words. I got a tourniquet on my arm that without a doubt felt 10 times worse than getting shot. The tourniquet was absolutely excruciating. And it took us almost an hour to get back to our element. And during this hour, we made another mistake of, it was, again, that village was pretty lively. And so we're trying to sneak our way back, but we can't use the back roads, if we will. Like, we literally kind of have to use trails and roads within the village to quickly get back to our element. Well, when we stopped and checked out all of my my injuries, we used red light because we were still in a tactical situation, which I know better. The problem with using a red light is you can't see blood underneath a red light. And now my biggest injury that I was concerned about was my arm. I didn't complain about the massive bleeding in my leg or in my side because I didn't even feel that had happened. And so we never did a full body check on me to see if I had any other injuries. We just addressed the big injury without addressing the, doing a full body check. Again, something we knew better than, and just, didn't do it right when it counted. So about 45 minutes into this walk back that we had to take the long way around, I start blacking out. And I don't know, at the time, I didn't know why I was blacking out. And I'm telling like, hey guys, we got to stop. Like, I'm going to throw up and I'm about to pass out. And they're like, Brent, do not pass out. Like, we're not carrying your big ass. Like, we have another guy, with a shot leg. He can't carry you. Like, you've got to suck this up. And I remember telling you, hey, I don't control if I black out, guys. I'm just telling you it's about to happen. And they're like, well, do what you can. We eventually made it back to the rest of the element. And at this point I'm limping, and I don't even know why I'm limping. I just know my leg hurts. And our medic comes up and he goes, as cool as a cucumber, hey, Brent, how's it going? Not good, Dan. I'm shot. He goes, why? He goes, I can see that. He goes, anything else wrong with you? I said, no, I'm just shot. Please look at my arm. None of the fentanyl lollipops are working. I took everyone in patrol has a fentanyl lollipop, including me. I took mine. I took his. I'm eating everyone's fentanyl lollipop, trying to get rid of this pain. And it just wouldn't help with the pain at all. And he goes, what's wrong with your leg? I said, nothing. It's my arm. For the love of God, look at my arm. And he laughs, and he sticks his thumb in this hole in my leg and says, nothing? And I was like, oh, Dan, why would you do that? He's like, you're such an idiot. And he cuts off my pant leg. He's like, what happened to your leg? And that was the first time I really realized that I had eaten that grenade and didn't really know it. I was passing out from a loss of blood.
Right.
And by the time I actually got to the helicopter, I did pass out from a lack of blood, and I passed. I woke up in DEVGRU the next day, after surgery. And I remember that, and I remember sitting on the hospital bed going, that was a crazy night. I kind of can't believe we got out of that one.
That is an unbelievable story. How long is the road to recovery for you?
Not long. I never missed a rotation. I missed a couple jump trips. The biggest thing was they kept on doing washout surgeries on me because infection was a serious concern. I had taken my antibiotic pills. Luckily, it was one of the things I did do right. We were always told, you get shot, blown up, something, and in the nastiness of Afghanistan, you take these pills. And that's actually what saved my life. And even with those pills, infection was a big problem within my body. We finally got the infection under control. The doctors were trying to be nice, but they're like, hey, you should know, like, if we can't get this under control, you might lose your arm. And so, every time I went under surgery, I was always the first thing I checked to see if I still had my arm. They never ended up having to take my arm. They put a massive plate in there to keep my arm together. And the bones actually grow back pretty fast. And I was down for 3 months. I wasn't back to 100%, but I could operate 3 months later, and like I said, never missed a rotation out of it.
Curious to get your opinion. Which one do you find to be the more complete, dominant unit, and why?
This is it's funny you asked this, and so I just finished coaching football for 3 years, coaching high school football, which I was asked to do. I don't know I learned, but just because of like my coaching the heart and stuff. So the unit guys, we have heart. I mean, people meet me and they're just unimpressed. I mean, I'm just a 5'7" like dude, but you don't want to go against me like still, you know what I mean? I will go against anybody and win. Like, it's just in me. But man, I mean, I know some SEAL Team 6 guys, and they just, I don't know, have better recruiting. They are just bigger and studlier. So it's like, if it's going to be UFC, we're probably going to lose because we got just a lot of skinny, scrawny guys. But little guys I know that killed more people than malaria. So I don't know, man. Just SEAL Team 6, they're more impressive looking and sounding, and they're good dudes. Like, I met them, man. We work together sometimes over there, and I caught up with some of them on the TV show SEAL Team. So a lot of that hostility went away as you meet him and talk to him and stuff.
Right.
I mean, one of them put a laser on me, and I can never forgive that. Like, we're getting out of to go on a patrol, and this guy points his laser at me and my team leader, and like he's thinking we're bad guys, and it's like, so yeah, that was a problem.
How did that situation get resolved?
Oh God, man. It's like that's when our commanders really step in, when we do units, joint things together. They're awesome. We're better at hostage rescue. And I was talking about somebody's grabbing this. It's like, pain. That's our bread and butter. So
that's a good answer. They're better looking is what you're saying, but
yeah,
if you got to get a hostage, call Delta Force.
Yep.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Syria, because ISIS obviously did horrific things in Syria and Iraq. And I'm curious if you think the general public has any idea of the savagery of some of the people that we're dealing with in that region of the world. And I want to preface this. When I was in college, ISIS was starting to become like a really big problem. And I remember I was a poli-sci major, which was the most useless degree in the history of the world. But we would have debates about, like, the rise of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all this terrorism stuff. And there were kids at a major university that were saying there's really no difference between the terrorists and us. And they're only terrorists because we backed them into a corner. I'm like, you realize they're burning people in cages, right? Dude, how different is it compared to the reality on the ground when you're dealing with those animals?
Animals is exactly what they are, and people asking me about, some getting shot, losing teammates, PTSD, whatever it is, or if it's, taking another person's life. And I always said, I never felt like I ever took another person's life. I shot a lot of two-legged animals. I shot a lot of people that were not human and did not deserve to be on this earth. So I sleep like a baby at night. And ISIS, without a doubt, was the most, savage enemy we had come across. They had this young, when Raqqa was still their stronghold, they had this battalion called the Young Lions Battalion. And they were like 7 and 8-year-old kids. And they were training them to be soldiers, which isn't that unique, except their final exercise was they would put them through this like CQB shoot house, and they would have live people, like enemy, like POW, Kurds, Christians, bound and gagged. And the same way we would go through and shoot paper targets in a shoot house, they're shooting people on their final exercise, training these kids to murder. It's again, that Jordanian pilot that they set on fire alive in a cage. The Coptic Christians in Israel that they marched, I think it was 40 of them to the beach and just murdered them. The beheadings, you name it. They deserved everything they got and more. And to be honest with you, we should have gotten involved in that a lot earlier. That, the only mistake America made was not doing anything until they had taken over half of Syria and half of Iraq. And now we were like, oh, maybe we should do something about this. And as I got older, I'm not the person that says we should be the world's police. I had no problem pulling out of Afghanistan. I have no problem of not being the world's police. But the moment they started cutting off American heads, we should have showed up, and we could have, and ISIS would have been a blip on the radar. But they cut off 5 American heads, and we still didn't do anything about it until they had almost taken over Iraq. It really was a blunder on America's part, to be honest with you.
Does it feel better killing someone like that compared to maybe, a regime loyalist, or maybe I hear a lot of guys talk about some of the guys they fought in Afghanistan. They almost, I wouldn't say feel bad for them, but they're like, is this guy purely evil? Maybe, maybe not. But they all say when it came to ISIS, it just felt better. Would you agree with that?
I would. I mean, the way I would rate it, if you will, and everyone will have a different, experience and a different answer. In Iraq, sometimes we were in the middle of, of a civil war, at some point, that at the Afghanistan, I respected the guys in Afghanistan. They always come out to fight, they're at least willing to die for their cause. But man, I really, really, really hated ISIS. I never walked by a dead ISIS body with anything other than just joy.
Were those guys?
I know that sounds weird, but
no, it doesn't sound weird. No, it doesn't sound weird at all.
Yeah.
Were ISIS presented it, and I'm enjoying this a lot. I think our viewers are going to be fascinated by this, especially the younger ones. ISIS they projected, we're so tough, we're so violent, you can't reach the level that we get to. If you captured any of these guys, did they drop the tough guy act pretty quickly, or did they try to maintain that in custody?
You had a good mix of like some of the foreign fighters that would come through, that they were tenacious, and they'd look at you like, man, if you'd take these flex cuffs off me, I'd choke the life out of you right now. I mean, they just stare at you with dead eyes. You get a mixture of everything. And there are plenty of ISIS fighters on the front lines, especially when the march to Raqqa was going on, that they didn't want to be on the front lines, but it was either stay on the front lines and fight, or retreat and get killed by ISIS. And you could still say, well, you still enjoyed watching them die, because like they raised their hand to come fight for evil, and then they found out what evil was, and so you already voted, you came to do this, and now be careful what you wish for.
What are your rules of engagement like in a situation like that, where it's not like World War II where guys are wearing uniforms? You can look over there like, oh, those are Germans, those are Japanese. It's like the civilian population is wearing, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much the exact same thing as everyone else. So do they have to fire at you first, or if you see a guy with an AK coming 200 yards off, can you engage him? What's the situation like that?
So, and here's something that I think is a misconception that everyone understands, is everyone has the same rules of engagements. Everyone's got the same rules of engagements, and the rules of engagements are, anyone that's a threat to you, you can engage. And there's two words. I'm probably not going to remember off the top of my head now that I'm on a podcast having to remember them. Immediate threat and imminent threat. Those are the two things that everyone has within their ROE, and I'll tell you exactly what that means. An immediate threat is exactly what you're talking about. A guy with an AK, I come into a room, or I turn the corner on a street, and there's a guy with an AK, and it's not just a guy with an AK. He could be a policeman, but he looks at me and he raises his AK. He's an immediate threat to me. I can shoot him all day long. And those engagements are never questioned. They're cut and dry. Here's where it gets different, really, between the different units. Everyone has imminent threat as well, but not everyone acts on imminent threat in the same way. And I'll explain that. Imminent threat means I'll make up a situation that's never happened. A guy could be on a cell phone across the street, and if I truly believe he's calling in a QRF, I don't have to wait for the QRF to get here to go, oh, I'm going to shoot that guy now because he was calling in a QRF on a cell phone. I mean, he's an imminent threat. Right. If a guy is, and these are all subjective calls that the guy on the ground gets to make and has to live with. If a guy is running around, let's taken to Afghanistan. He's running to the base of the mountain. And if I believe, based on intel, that they have fighting positions at the base of the mountain, I don't have to wait for him to get to the base of the mountain and grab a gun to go, that's what I thought. And now that he's armed, we'll shoot it out. I can shoot him as he's running away, going to that, to that fighting position. But you'll be questioned on it, and you better be able to articulate, and with reasonable justifications of why you took those shots. Because I also assure you, even though they seem like loose rules of engagements, and they kind of are, but if you have a guy on your team taking advantage of those, he'll find his way off the team really quick. We're not the evil people the rest of the world perceives us to be. We don't put up with that. And really more importantly, to me, it's more of a the unit will ask you this all the time. It's not necessarily the decision you made. They want to know why you made that decision. Why did you make it? So you could have the same decision, but the reason you made it could be wrong, and that says way more about it. So if you have a guy that is perceiving things to just not be the ground truth, and he's shooting at people because what is really happening is something way more dangerous in his mind, then he doesn't have a good grasp on the reality of the situation, and that's more or less the reason why we're going to get rid of him.
Well, I have to say, I was texting you kind of about the things I've noticed as like an outside observer, just getting to know these two groups of people. There, to me, are some interesting kind of cultural differences in the dudes. Like the SEAL Team 6 guys always seem significantly more laid back. They kind of lean into like the tattoos, like the SEAL vibe. Like that's there, like from all the guys I've interviewed, like that is part of the persona. Like I don't want to say Hollywood gets it right, but like that's very real. The Delta dudes are more, in my personal experience, it's like, I don't know if this guy should be teaching like high school history or like being an accountant, and they're like 5 foot, they're like 5'5",
Yeah.
and that's not negative. I'm not saying anything negative. I love both those dudes, but now people on YouTube can stop screaming at me. We now have another SEAL Team 6 opinion. And so there you go. We got it on record. Chris has it on the record. We're going to get this out as a special clip so everyone can stop screaming at me about being unfair. Are we all in agreement?
Yeah. No, dude, those are generalizations. I don't know that many Delta guys that aren't big fucking beasts of dudes with tattoos,
I think what changed is if you look at the timeline, like if you look at the guys in Delta from like the 90s and the early 2000s, like guys that were in before GWAT started and then were in the early days of GWAT.
Yeah.
They look significant. The team photos, not to get too nerdy here. You look at the team photos of them and you look at the team photos of like Kyle Morgan or like dudes from that time period. They don't look like they're even in the same group. That is 100% correct when it comes to being tattooed and much bigger. I guess that's just how things change over time, right?
They change over time, dude. I have some close buddies that you would never know. They look like librarians from DEVGRU. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
It just depends. Each of the 4 teams within the unit all have their own over time little nuances and differences too. You know what I mean? Like, I never knew another squadron to have, so many like ginger redheads in their team than red. So I guess it was fitting, but, we've got a lot of mine had more guys from different ethnic backgrounds. You know what I mean? Like a lot of like Asian, Hispanic, black, white, whatever, and maybe one team had a bunch of dudes that look like librarians, so it just changes and flows over time through the drafts and everything like that. But like I said, I feel like it's the same. If you got a group of those guys in their what they wear every day and a group of those guys what they wear every day, like not uniforms, but you wouldn't know the difference.
I love this. This is gonna fly.
Well, so that's actually so very quickly. I got lucky, and so I was there after Anaconda. So after Anaconda happened, which basically moved all the Taliban to essentially Pakistan. So when I got there was right after Anaconda. So we basically, that deployment, my first, we built all the outstations on the Pakistani, or not on, but near the Pakistani border. So all the places that you hear about, Asadabad, Jalalabad, the Korgal Valley, which it really wasn't called that at that time, but all those areas, that's when we built those fire bases. And so I was lucky. I was at a very, very small, I mean, it was really like a small compound, it was just one platoon. I was a sniper at that time, and I got attached to a unit team because they didn't have a sniper. So I got to work with them on a couple missions, and after that I was like, yep, this is what I'm going to do. And so then as soon as I got back from Afghanistan, I put in a packet.
So let me ask you about that. I want to drill down and see, you're attached to a unit team. You're not a member of the unit at this time. You're an Army Ranger. What was your perception of those guys the first time you got to work with them? Because I hear from a lot of people, and I'll paraphrase, when they work with members from the unit, it's like they think they're larger than life. Like, these dudes are superheroes compared to the rest of us. Is that kind of the same impression you had?
The best way I can describe it, or not the best way I can describe it, a thing that does a great job of capturing it is Black Hawk Down. I mean, they really did a good job. I mean, you saw them as gods, and when I was a Ranger, I was just like, it was like when it came to combat, it was like they were Morpheus. It's like they knew what was going to happen before. It was very strange, and also actually the guy that led the team that I was attached to, and I'll just say this now because it's, what are the odds? 4 year, whatever, I forget the exact time, but 4 years later, that guy that ran that team, 4 years later, he is the exact same person that put the tourniquet on my arm.
Walk me through how this happens, because it's an explosive device. What do you remember from how it went down?
So there's a lot to give the full explanation of why. I can't give the full explanation of why what happened.
Got it.
Talk about a thing that I can't talk about.
Got it. No, I understand.
Yeah, but it's unfortunate because if I could talk about that part, it would make so much sense. But the very short version is, we were in Sadr City that night, and we did an offset. So we were walking through Sadr City at night, and we hit a house. Like, that's the house. We hit the house. We go inside, and it's just like, or I assume like a law enforcement. You can tell when you go in a house if the people are guilty or not. You can just feel it. Generally, in my experience, if you go in there and they're shouting and the women are going crazy, and it's the wrong house. If you go in and no one says a word, it's the right house, because the guilty just shut up and don't say anything. The not guilty, you're like, what the hell are you doing here?
Right. Yeah.
Guilty, they're just like, yeah, we know why they're here. It's not surprising. They're not happy about it, but they're not surprised. And so anyways, that house, I was like, nah, just no, not these people. And so anyways, we heard that I think two teams, they're like, hey, we actually think it's over here. So two teams went out. One was actually a team from the unit that I now play on TV, that was attached to us. They went out. They went on the front side, or went around to go to the front side of this other house, and my team was basically going towards the back side of the house. So very shortly, what happened was, it was the wrong house, and when we hit that one house, the actual house it was, which was next door, which is not exactly next door because Sadr City is kind of weird of how it's built. But, you know, they heard us, they were getting ready, prepping, you know, their gear, you know, and so they were ready to go. So when that team came around, a bunch of dudes opened up out of the front, what I assume would be the living room, with AKs and shot, I think they shot 3, if I'm not mistaken, they shot 3 of the members of that team. 2 of them were pretty much out of the fight at that point. But they were, I mean, it was heavy. I wasn't on that side of the house, but just hearing it, I was like, oh man, that's extreme. So I ran into the back door, which came into the kitchen, cleared through there, went in the hallway, and those same guys, as we approached that room, shot through the walls of that hallway, shot the guy literally right next to me. So then we backed off, and then we were and I'd have to draw it out, but we were in a tactical position that was just there wasn't a lot we could do. So we were trying to kind of figure out how to solve it. And the next thing I know, I remember just the whole room, or actually it wasn't really a room, it was the hallway, you know, so it was more like a tube straight at me, and just everything exploded. And I actually remember hitting the ground and looking up down the hallway. I was just confused. I didn't know what had happened. And I can say, you know, getting shot at, okay. It's one thing, but the explosion made me feel small. It was like a superhero just grabbed me and was like, or it was like the Hulk grabbed me and was like, it felt like a supernatural power. And it blew, so it was a nighttime hit. It blew my nods and my nod mount off my face. So I went from, you know, under nods to not being able to see anything. It obviously, my arm, I thought it blew off. I'm trying to think of what else it wrecked, but wrecked several things. But and everything was pitch black for me, and I really didn't know what was going on. I just felt my arm was blown off, so I got up and walked outside to the back, and there was a wall that we had hopped to get in. That wasn't happening, so I just put my back against the wall and tried to take care of myself. But I never lost consciousness. The only time actually I did lose consciousness is when, and I still to this day don't know how they got me over that wall. I have no idea. But other than that, probably 5 minutes that they got me over the wall, I never lost consciousness.
And I am literally stunned. I don't even know what to say. That is every part of that story, from the moment the first shots rang out to you getting back over the wall, losing consciousness, is hard for me, who's obviously never been in a gunfight, and I assume most people watching this who've never been in a gunfight, to even comprehend. Did you take a moment? Was there a moment when you looked down at your arm and you kind of understood, like, oh shit, like I'm in deep trouble? Or were you in such a state of shock that you didn't even really, quite frankly, understand what had just happened to your body? And if you can explain, how much of your arm are you able to see? Like, do you have a good assessment of how damaged it is in the moment?
So that's not a question I think I've ever been asked, but it's a good question. So when it happened, it killed the nerve in my arm to about here. So and I know this sounds weird, but it's the best way to describe it. So it felt gone from here. It felt not there. I know it sounds weird. And then I got outside, and there was a porch light, and I looked at it, and if you can see, so this was all gone. I mean, it was holding on by, basically half my arm, and it was broken in, I want to say 8 places, so I can't even replicate how it was hanging. And then up here, this was flayed out this way, and this was flayed out this way. So from about just above my wrist to my shoulder, when I looked at my arm in that light, I mean, it was hamburger. It was done. It was hamburger meat. It was zombie flesh. So yeah, I looked at it and I went, well, that's gone. That just that's that's going. And I knew it was bad. And then my first thing was, well, the arm's going. I'm losing my right arm. That sucks. And then I thought, and I'll never forget this thought in a million years. Then I literally saw that I had an arterial bleed. And I went, you're losing your arm. And then I was like, oh, I've got an arterial bleed, which if you have an arterial bleed, you've got, I'll be conservative and say 45 seconds to a minute to do something before you won't die. But in about 45 seconds, you're going to lose enough blood to where it's going to be hard for you to have the strength to solve it, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
I remember seeing that and going, well, okay, yeah, you're going to lose your right arm, but you better solve that bleed or you die. And that would be stupid. Don't know why I used that word, but in my head, I remember saying, and then you die, and that would be stupid. So, yeah, I knew how bad it was. And I'll tell you this, after I looked at it under that light, I did not, and I'm not exaggerating. Well, I did actually look at it one more time, but I didn't look at my arm uncovered for probably a year. I mean, I literally ignored it. In fact, in hindsight, I should have wore a freaking eye patch on my right eye. I just didn't look. I didn't want to be reminded of it. The next time I looked at it was actually when they saved it, because they told me they were going to cut it off when I went into surgery. But I woke up the next morning, looked over, it was there, and they saved it. And actually, by the way, they told me. Now again, I was on a lot when they told me that they were going to cut it off. I was on quite a lot of drugs. I was like, do whatever you want, cut off the legs. I don't care. I was like crazy. But they told me when they saved it, the only reason that they even attempted to save it was because how many extremity surgeries they had done during that time frame because of V-beds. So they just were now so advanced on, and again, I don't know the details, but they just had new techniques. He said a year ago, we would have cut it off without even attempting to, again, do something different.
Did you ever find out what had happened to all the bad guys that were in the house? Did anyone ever kind of debrief you and say, hey, after the explosion went off, here's kind of how everything shook out afterwards?
Yes, that was years later, but yes. Yeah. I've never told anyone this, but I'll tell you, or everyone watching this. Only one person lived on that whole thing. And only one person lived. And the reason that person lived is because I didn't shoot him. And I could have. He actually had an AK. When I came into the room, his gun hit me in the chest.
And so was it? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, his gun hit, like, it was so close. I turned and his gun hit me. And the only reason I didn't shoot him is I could see behind him. I can't remember if it was pink or purple, but it was a color that stood out. I want to say pink, but again, I don't remember. But I could see like a pink or purple outline behind him. His wife was behind, or one of his, I don't know, was behind him. And that in that, millisecond, so I ended up taking the gun from him. I threw him outside the room. They took him, but he's the only one that lived. And ironically, it's one of my few regrets of my time, because that guy ended up being the main facilitator of the whole thing.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So all the other guys, they weren't around to do anything anymore. But for many years, I wondered if he went through the system and then got out and went and hurt other people. So one of my biggest regrets is that.
Gotcha. So the one thing that we talked about that we're going to get into is your last, mission, would you call it? Yeah, mission event, your last time overseas in Afghanistan was a very notable mission. And I want you to kind of walk the audience through the background, lay the baseline. What was the mission? Why were you there? How did you find yourself there? Let's just start with that.
So the mission was a hostage rescue and for I'll leave it to the people to sort of dig into that more if they're interested in that. But from my perspective, it was an interesting story for me because it was my first opportunity to go on a hostage rescue. It was also happening while I was on my terminal leave, which is weird. So how do I explain this? So with no ego, it's kind of like the feeling, it kind of became a joke among the team too, like, hey, you're on terminal leave, you're getting out of the Navy, but we have this thing and we need you. It wasn't that at all, obviously, but there was a reason for it, is because, it was a very surprise spin up for that mission. We actually did leave, very fast for that one. There wasn't a lot of time to hang around and get ready for it, which was pretty typical for those types of missions in the years like previous to that. So we kind of gotten used to it, but we left really quickly, and we had, I was a recce guy. So we, sniper recce type guy. So we had most of our planners, which are recce guys, out on different trips training, right? Trying to stay current. So they weren't going to be able to get back fast enough to blow out for this op. So I had a troop chief who essentially called me up. My locker was cleaned out. I had turned everything in except for a pair of night vision goggles, my primary weapon, and I had all my gear still ready for those missions for that period of standby on our cycle. So knowing that, my troop chief essentially called me up, and I was really upset because I was in the team just doing emails. They started to spin up, and I go, of course, they get to do this thing right when I go on terminal leave and I'm getting out of the Navy. So I'm back in my neighborhood. I'm running a couple of miles, and I come back and my phone's blowing up. It's my troop chief. I call him back. He says, hey, what are the chances that you'll come in here and help us plan for this thing? I said, well, of course I'll come in and help plan for this thing. And then sort of joking, I just said, and then, well, if I plan, do I get to go? So he paused for a second. He said, actually, hold on a second. And he went to talk to the officers, and they came back on the phone. He's like, yeah, you're current on everything. I had done a jump trip when I came back just to sort of do a fun thing on my way out, but that allowed me to be current. So we needed a tandem guy, we needed a couple tandem guys, and all of the guys that had that qual were not going to be able to make it back in time. So we organized sort of the chalk loads. Yeah, so we blew out for this hostage rescue. I got to jump in a tandem and be sort of the point man.
Real quick, for the viewers who hear these words like tandem, who have no idea what that means, when you say that, what does that mean?
There's a certain number of us that are qualified for jumpers that need to come with us for a hey-ho that are unqualified to jump with the team. So we have to have a certain number of guys that can tandem somebody in. So like a medic or a comms person or somebody outside of the main team.
So they're strapped to you is what you're saying.
Yeah. So I jumped, the guy strapped to me.
Got it. Yep. Perfect. Keep going.
Yep. So we did these missions. We did a couple of them. We ended up not getting the hostages for various reasons, but there was, like an elaborate tunnel system, which fast forward when we actually were able to recover those hostages, some of their recollection of what happened was pretty interesting. They actually heard us all above them as they were sort of stuffed down by these guys down into the tunnels. So it was really kind of strange that they were being moved around down there while we were busy clearing the village. So unfortunately, it was not a successful hostage rescue, but for me, it was the last mission. It was like a last hurrah. And some other things happened on that were very important to me, especially getting out of the Navy afterwards, and going through that. And maybe I could talk about that later, but there was some things that happened that were important to me because, people, it's cool to talk about the hostage rescue, all of the sort of external details of that. But something happened on that mission that was that really affected me deeply that I didn't really think about enough while I was in. And I think that might be part of the sort of collective ego or sort of ability to put those things away that has to be within all of us in order for it to work, to sort of function as a team through some of those experiences. And one of the things that happened was, this was the Haqqani network. So they were known to rig explosives around for, some of the situations where they had taken hostages in the past. So they were notorious for some of those kind of tactics. We were briefed up on this stuff, and there was a lot of intel towards this. And as we made our way into the target, there was some activity going on. There were some bad guys moving around, but we were able to sneak up on the target undetected. There was some sort of soft compromise before that. There's a lot of early warning network stuff around there, and we were in an area that hadn't been really operated in for a while. And so, we could pick that apart, but there could have been various reasons, anything from hearing the aircraft, miles away to just small noises or something stirred them up to the point where at the very last minute, they were able to stuff the hostages down into a tunnel system. And when we got there, the beds were still warm. There was evidence that they were there very recently. So that was a frustrating thing for all of us to deal with. But the other thing that happened was there were 5 males in the courtyard, and our tactics were to try to minimize breaching just because there's so much dust. So you would essentially blind yourselves out. But because it was a hostage rescue with very specific rules of engagement, we decided that we were going to do that and just sort of take on a little bit more risk in order to get in there quickly. So we did do that. Myself and another teammate of mine made a very deliberate decision to eliminate the males that were in that courtyard. I think it turned out later that there were some weapons under the blankets and stuff like that. But it would have been very risky for the breach to go off and for all of the operators to get dusted out and not knowing what could happen. So we essentially did the right thing by eliminating any risk whatsoever to the assaulters, which is our job as recce guys. But it turns out that 2 of the males were actually, and we found that out later. They were probably, I don't know, maybe ish. And so, these kind of things happen, especially with those kind of rules of engagement. We don't ever obviously train for that. So maybe I think we'll talk about that later with one of your questions about critics towards, some of the wartime stuff. But that really, there was nothing that affected me the way that did from any of my experiences. We can talk about PTSD and different kind of stuff like that, but I never really regretted things. I never really regretted decisions that I made. And I don't really, aside from teammates being lost, that those kind of things never really affected me deeply. I wasn't the guy that had like nightmares and these kind of typical things that people might think about PTSD, but that really affected me, not in the moment, but later when I got out of the Navy. And I really had to sort of detached from that life to figure out my, a new purpose and purpose in life, which is really a deep struggle for a lot of guys. And I only understood it when it became my turn for that. But that incident, then suddenly after I was out, I did start having a very specific nightmare, and it was that I had killed those younger males, and then they sort of rolled over, and every time in the dream they rolled over and it was like my own kids' faces. So it was this feeling like I essentially like had killed my own kids, and some sort of like guilt, traumatic feeling associated with that experience.
Even though you had done exactly what you had to do for that mission.
Yeah, exactly. It was for sure the right thing to do. We circled up as a team afterwards and discussed it, and really there was no issues with it according to what was going on with what the rules of engagement were, the reasons why. I mean, me and my teammate were able to account for every shot that we took, but it still affected me in some way, pretty deeply after that. So I realized later that it had more to do with just unhealed trauma and things that I had going on from even before the Navy, back from childhood and stuff like that. And that's really healing myself from the inside and coming to terms with who I was and what my purpose now was after the Navy, and just sort of clearing myself from addictions and toxic habits, and trying to reconnect with my family after all those years of being gone, and my wife. Once that all happened, I started to realize those things, those dreams and those nightmares went away. So I think what the experience allowed me to do really was just to be more mindful of moments with people that I love, with my kids, in a way that I never was before. So I realized that it was the right decision to get out of the Navy at that point while they were still young, and they still didn't really have memories of me being gone like 270 days a year.
Right.
And now it's like every day I just feel, sometimes I even cry, a little bit when I'm hanging out with them or when we're sort of laying down at the end of the day. And I'm just infinitely more mindful of moments with my boys. And so I think that's what's come out of it, honestly, with that experience.
Chris, I got to tell you, and I know we talked about this off screen previously, but that is, to me, is just a regular guy, just a listener, no military experience. That experience, the first time I heard it and right now, it's unbelievably profound. And I think it's important that you understand that the viewers watching this and myself, that's how we view it. That's how people are going to view that when they hear that, because that's a story 99.999% of people never understand. They will have no idea what it's like to go through that. And here you are courageously talking about the ups, the downs. I mean, it's nothing short of stunning. And I hope that the appreciation from the viewers is not lost on you, because I promise you it is definitely there.
Thank you. Yeah, there's when I think back on different stories, different things that happened, extortion 17 was a big thing. Like anytime bad things happen, it's profoundly affecting each operator inside, but we all find a way to get through it. And when I think back on all those times, it's sort of black and white when you're there, right? When you're in it. And just like anything else, things aren't black and white. And so I think that each guy has a profound experience that they keep within themselves. And that's just one memory that I have to sort of explain how that works. There's so many books on the book on killing and that describe, different psychologies associated with that kind of work. But I think we're now in a time where it's starting to be a little bit of a shift in the special forces community and stuff, where guys are actually able to discuss and sort of do it in a therapeutic way, describe how that actually affected them, inside.
And do you have one thing that you look back on when you look at kind of the way that you mentally processed it, the way that you kind of came back? Like, was there one thing you did that really helped the most, that maybe someone who's listening to this right now, they have their own traumatic experience from war and maybe they're struggling to find that one thing to get them over the hump? Was there one thing for you that really kind of gave you that extra little push?
Yeah, for me, it was just that transition out really became one of the most difficult times in my life, even more so than anything that happened in my career. And I didn't understand that. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to get out and it's going to be, reintegrating back into society or whatever. And it's obviously starting to become more noticeable from sort of the general public or people per se, that it's a real thing that each guy has to go through, and it's going to be different for each guy. And the catalyst for what they do with that, or the choices they make, like, because you're gonna, in my opinion, in my experience from this is, and it took me a while, it took me 5-6 years to figure this out. Some guys it's faster, some guys it's not, and some guys never do figure it out, and then unfortunately they, that's why we have such a big problem with veteran suicide. Right. And I went through a program that really helped me figure that out, but you come to a point where it's kind of a fork in the road, and you can kind of make the choice to continue to sort of devolve in your ego and your attachment to all of that sort of darkness and guilt and shame and those things, or to sort of face all of your demons and all of those things for what they are, confront them, and then make a choice to accept it, and then better yourself after that, each and every day, to the point that you can actually fulfill your purpose in life and your fullest potential. And so, I feel like at this point I'm just on it's a journey each day, trying to better myself and feel good and happy. And so I'm super grateful that I went through all of that struggle and was able to find a way to make that choice.
I mean, it's just unbelievably jarring to me sitting here listening to this, and I know people watching this are going to say the same thing and text me the same thing. And one of the things that sticks out to me when I talk to guys like you, talk to tier one guys, whether it's in the Army, the Navy, whatever it might be, is you guys have unfortunately had to witness maybe the worst savagery in modern day civilization, if you even want to call it civilization over that. I don't know. That's up for people to debate. Do you think the public has an understanding of what we're dealing with when it comes to these extremist people? Or do you think they see something on the news, turn it off, and go right back to watching whatever else they were watching?
I try not to generalize too much, but yeah, I for sure think that with all of the advent of social media and media and just all of this barrage of information, it sort of desensitizes us to the truth of things sometimes. And then we start to generalize, we start to make judgments. And for sure, I think that it got to a point where, when we cover something so much, it was like Afghanistan, Iraq for so many years, that our attention spans, it's like maybe we all have a little bit of ADHD because of technology, right? It's just constantly coming in. And so, yeah, for sure, people, I think, see it and they maybe react to it for an instant and they go, wow, that's crazy. And then they move on to whatever the next, distracting thing is that doesn't matter so much. So,
For you, so obviously I interviewed Bill Rapier, who is a larger than life figure, I think, in the special operations community. He's a living legend. If you guys can watch that, find it out there, it's great. He said in that interview that for him, it was never personal. Like being in the Navy, being deployed was never personal at all. It was, this is the mission. This is what we're going to do. It's not personal to me. That's what he said. I'm not saying that. Obviously, I wasn't there. For you, was it always looked at like, this is my job, I'm just doing a job? Or were there points in your 13-year career where you're like, hey, this is personal to me. Like, this is a personal situation now?
Yeah, no, I think that his mindset for that is absolutely correct. we select guys based off of that. It can't be anything personal. It's like I hate to quote movies too much, but that movie Black Hawk Down, I always remember that moment where he's like, how do you do this? And he's like, it's just war, and that also comes into play when I think about critics of war, is like things happen, good and bad, there's so much context behind every situation, but the point being that it's war, right? So if you have that mindset, which is the correct thing, like it's not personal, then I think that it functions better that way as a unit, right? And every unit is different, but each guy's different. I think the struggle with taking things personally comes more into play with your reputation among your teammates and sort of judgments on each other. Cause like those teams they're beautiful with the camaraderie and the brotherhood. And then when things aren't going so well, or when there's not that much combat repetition, you start to sort of judge each other's reputations based off of other things besides combat. And it can also be equally dark as it is beautiful, where guys just sort of jump on each other. And that's really the moment where I think that it would have helped me personally to not take anything personal or take things personal at any point. Right. And I try to think that in my life now at this point. If I just don't take anything personal, I'm fine. Even if somebody means it personally, if it doesn't affect me if I don't take it personally, and I just function more efficiently.
Absolutely. And if someone else wants to be negative, that's their problem.
Nothing to do with me. Yeah.
Right, that's their problem. Now, you did just bring up something that that's a good, that's another perfect segue. Now, Bob knows what's coming because I ask this in literally every military interview I do. SEAL Team 6 versus Delta Force, like the most popular debate in the history of the military.
Take it away, boys.
There's a debate about it.
Well, there is a huge debate. So now we've got Bob on the record on this from the previous interview. He gave a very diplomatic answer, but it was a good answer. You two, what are your thoughts on the differences and which one's better? Take it away.
Oh, you just had to do it, didn't you?
I think that's what I said too.
So here's the deal for me. Those guys are some of the greatest fucking dudes out there, right? I got a lot of fucking friends out there. We've worked with them a lot over the years, and I got nothing but respect for them cats, for sure, So
who's better though, Gilly? Who's better?
Well, I'm going to say I'm better, right? I'm going to say we're better, right? But I'm sure they'll say they're better, right? And that's what you should do, right? Because that's your organization. We all have our niches, we all have what we're good at. And I can only hope that we complement each other out there. Yeah, I'm doing the politically correct answer here.
That's way more politically correct than I was.
Yeah, that was more politically correct.
I mean,
so
but
I'm not going to be.
It's true, though. I mean, that's the bottom line. I hope we can complement each other out there. And if, they're not the force that should be picked to do it, then we should, right? So, I mean, that's just kind of what it boils down to.
All right, Nate, what's your thoughts?
So I'm going to repeat something that a friend of mine, Mike, told me or said to me a long time ago, right? I think the SEAL Team 6 guys are cut from the exact same piece of cloth as we are, right? If they would have joined the Army instead of the Navy, they would have been in Delta Force, right? But they came up in a different organization with different culture and different, right? I think those guys I've got some friends there. They're awesome dudes. I think those guys are great, really great at what they do. But Delta Force is definitely better, right? And the reason I know is because I don't know a single guy that has left the unit to go to SEAL Team 6, but I know of guys leaving SEAL Team 6 to come to the unit. So,
truth.
Well, in my interview with Chris Van Zant, he said on one of their deployments that they had a SEAL Team 6 guy with them. And
Yeah, we had him attached to us.
Yeah, like how the meshing either did well or didn't use. So I thought that was interesting. I got to ask. I've got the opportunity to do some SEAL Team 6 interviews and meet some of those guys and hang out with some of those guys. And yeah, no, I like them a lot too. I have all the respect in the world for them. I do like to stir the pot though, because the internet definitely enjoys getting the debate going.
Of course.
As a Christian, is there any trouble squaring your Christian identity, your faith in God, your faith in Jesus with, I have to go kill bad people who are going to go do bad things if they're not taken out?
So two things to touch on there, because you brought up a great great topic that a lot of times guys don't touch on. It's your identity, and really, we all have a bunch of different identities. My primary identity is a Christian, Christ follower, most important thing in my life. The next one would be husband. The next one would be father, and then a bunch of other stuff after that. It is super, super important that as you order your identities, as you look at it and go, well, this is the most important thing in my life, that everything that is below, that is a lower priority, is in line with the ones that are above it. And so that's super, super important. So now getting specifically into, killing and, so an example that I use almost every class that I teach, I do a mindset talk, and then we'll talk about, as part of your willingness, what are you willing to do? We'll talk about, this book that is out there that probably most of us have somewhere, some of them are more used than others, but in that book, there's a list of rules. And if we look at a King James Bible, right, talking about a Bible, one of the rules in there is thou shalt not kill. So how do we square that away? How do we rectify that? So first off, the ancient Hebrews had different words for killing, just like we do, right? If if driving home from work tomorrow, a guy steps out in front of you and you run him over, that is different than if you just look at your neighbor's car and you really like it, so you decide to go kill your neighbor to take his car. Right? Those are completely different things, and we recognize that. The ancient Hebrews recognized that. So while the King James Version is not technically incorrect by saying thou shalt not kill, because if you murder someone, you did kill them. However, not all killing is murder. Right. And the word that is the word that is used there is overwhelmingly used in the context of murder, not in the context of killing. One of the things that actually, as I was sitting through my oral board for selection to go to the command, that is one of the things they asked me. They said, hey, you claim to be a Christian, and yet you're screening to go to an organization where we might ask you to kill people. And it was the psychologist that brought this question up. And I said, well, I'm glad you asked. Actually, I may not have said, I'm glad you asked that. Now I would say, I'm glad you asked that question. But at the time I launched into, well, the Bible talks about David, and David being a man after God's own heart. And David killed so many people that they wrote songs about him. I mean, the Israelites had songs. Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. And yet still David was a man after God's own heart. Right. And so David screwed a bunch of stuff up. And he was guilty of murder, but it was when he took, another man's wife and then had the man murdered. Right. He was not guilty of murder when he was killing Philistines in battle. So that was my answer to the psychologist, and he didn't like it, and the team guys liked it. So it was, but fortunately, it's more the team guys have more say than the psych does. So I guess to circle around to that question, it is absolutely, they are two different things. Murdering someone is different from killing someone to protect yourself or to protect your family, because really there's no malice. I mean, I remember going in on targets and actually, especially when I knew there was going to be pre-assault fires on targets, actually praying for the guys that were fixing to die from the pre-assault fires, just because the Bible says we're supposed to pray for our enemies. It was something that was hard for me at times to not hate those people, because, a bunch of my good friends died over the years. fighting them. And, so that was something that, that I had to deal with, because we're not supposed to hate people. We're supposed to love our enemies. But no, there's definitely, as I read it, and I have gotten significantly more serious about that. Like, honestly, I feel like as an active duty guy, I was too nonchalant about killing. I honestly, it's actually something I'd like to write an article about. I've been talking about it for a couple of years now. Maybe someday I will do it. But just this whole mentality that, like, oh, you never get over it, and it's this horrible burden that you carry. And man, I didn't experience that. And honestly, I don't think any of the guys that I was with experienced that. And I think in a large part, it's because our mindset was correct. We looked at it as, hey, we're going in, to kill bad guys, right? It's nothing personal. I mean, sometimes maybe we made it a little bit personal, but it's not a personal thing. It's, hey, you guys, your ideology is trying to take over the world, and you're trying to kill our people, and therefore better for me to go downrange and kill you over there than to wait until you come to our lands and kill more of us over here.
Interesting. That's a fascinating answer. I want to get in now to the injury, the explosion, and then you transitioning into that non-combat role. Are you able to talk about it all, what happened and how you were hurt?
Yeah, it's all second and third hand information. I don't remember any of it. We were in Al-Qaim, out in the western part of Iraq, and we were, hunting targets out there. It was told to me, we had a target close to the Syrian border, and basically due to assets, we had to drive out there. The Marines that we're there with told us that, that area's been mined for forever. You probably shouldn't drive. It came down to it. That was the option that we had. We took a mine clearing team. They cleared the way as we went. The two Humvees that were with the mine clearing team in front of us, we were the lead vehicle in our element. We were in a very large, armored personnel carrier called a Penzgauer. A Pander. And anyway, so we were driving, and again, I don't remember any of this, but I guess the two vehicles, two Humvees in front of us, drove over pressure plate IEDs. They weren't heavy enough to set them off. We were. Explosion went off. That sympathetically detonated a thermobaric weapon, which is like a rocket of sorts that when it shoots out, when it goes off, it puts explosive dust in the air, and then that ignites. It's mainly made for clearing caves and buildings and stuff. So that went off inside the vehicle too. Killed, as there's 6, 7, 8 of us in the vehicle. Killed 4 pretty much instantly, or within 24 hours it expired. And then the other 3 of the remaining 4 were maimed pretty good, and one just walked away. It was kind of amazing, and it was we were numbered, so we had 6 guys on our team leader being number 1, some letter combination number 1, down to 6 as the newest guy. And then we had a ranger as a gunner, and then one of our NBC guys, or nuclear, biological, chemical guys, who's our driver. Of the 6 guys on our team, it killed everybody, regardless of where you're seated. The explosion killed everybody that was even number and was married or had kids. All the single guys and the odd numbers are just maimed or left untouched, which was kind of odd. But again, I don't remember any of it. They transported me back to Al-Qaim by helicopter. We had a surgical response team that flew out on their jet and met us there. Got me stabilized. Along with the other people, I can only speak to what I know about myself. Got stabilized. Put me on a helicopter. Medevac flying back to Balad to do the brain surgery. My left frontal lobe was kind of eviscerated. they on the flight as they were going out, the SRT docs gave the PA that was flying with me, like, hey, here, I was on oxygen, and they're like, hey, there's extra oxygen under the jump seat in the back of the helicopter. I think it's just a regular kind of vanilla medevac bird. It wasn't one of, like 160th or anything. One of our medevac birds. So we're flying back. So my ox pulse goes way down. Like, okay, well, he started bagging me. That's not good. And the oxygen bottle's empty. So it goes, gets another one. And the one that, we'll just say it was a Marine bird. Nothing disparaging about the Marines. But whoever's flying the medevac bird, their oxygen bottles don't fit in our, they don't connect for whatever reason. So the first one doesn't connect. So now it's, bagging. So we got a long flight, like multiple hours. So none of the oxygen flight. So there's bagging and bagging. I flatlined once. They start me up again. Still bagging, flatline again. So end up flatlining 3 times. They get me going, and then this guy, his name's Chris, is the PA. He's like, "Look, we're just not going to make it there in time. Like, you can't just keep restarting this guy." And he put his hands down and his head down in his hands and looked down and saw this extra bottle that they had totally put out under the seat, and that actually was compatible with the system. So hooked that up and made it back to Balad, got brain surgery, woke up some months later in Walter Reed.
Wow. I'm speechless hearing that. So you say you woke up a few months later, so you have no recollection of entire months that followed that.
Yeah, I guess it was about 45 days. I woke up, so they woke me up at one point, because I was in a medically induced coma. So they brought me out of that. My dad was in the ICU with me when they did that. And I guess whatever drugs they give you make you agitated and kind of like itchy. And they're like, he's not going to, potentially he won't like this. But they wanted to see where, like, cognitively where I was. So they wake me up. I don't remember this, but my dad's telling me, he's like, they started asking you questions, and I thought it was 2005. I thought it was 1996. Or not, I'm sorry, 1996. I'd broken my femur on a jump with the Rangers. I thought I was in the hospital for that. So they're like, okay, probably should put him back in a coma. So before it went in, I told him, I was like, hey, I just had this dream. And I told him this dream, a very kind of, trippy LSD type dream. And they put me back in a coma, wake me up 2 weeks later. I kind of know more of what's going on. Like, okay, we're going to keep him out of the coma. I was like, hey, Dad, I just had this dream, tell the same dream verbatim. I don't remember that, though. I don't remember either of those instances. So about 2 weeks later, I start generating new memories. Like, people would come visit me, and they're like, oh, Jim, I haven't seen you in years. Like, I was here like a week ago. My brain was still healing. I wasn't generating new memories. And I was like, hey, Dad, I just had this dream. I told him the same dream verbatim. And it was, I still remember it, and everything. And it wasn't until that PA, Chris, who flew with me when he was retiring, he got an award and at his retirement, and we sat down together, and he's like, hey, do you even really know what happened? And he told me this whole story up till, the brain surgery in Balad. And he's the one that's telling me about flatlining and the other guys in the team, like when they actually expired and everything. I'm like, wow, it's pretty much, it's the dream I had and kept regurgitating. It's just like mine's super lucid and trippy and compared to what was actually happening in real life. So it was kind of interesting. That's basically all I have from, even I retrograded amnesia for 2 weeks prior to the actual incident. So basically there's about a 2-month period that's all I have is this weird dream.
And how long did it take for you to be cleared to return to the special mission unit in your new role that they transitioned you into?
Well, so actually I stayed in the same role, but when I went to get out, they wanted to medically board me out of the Army. at the time I didn't want that. I didn't really know that much about it. It just sounded to me like they were trying to kick me out of the army. My squadron was still deployed over in Iraq that got extended. So basically, there's another guy that got hurt about a month after me. He was in the hospital. One of our hand-to-hand instructors was up visiting him, and I ran into him, and I was like, hey, can you get me out of here? And he's like, well, sure. He's like, I'm driving back to North Carolina tonight. So when I got Roger, I'm like, let's go. Roger drove me home and just kind of went home and lived on one floor of my house. I had my own house at the time and lived on that floor. I didn't want to try and really go mess with the steps too much. But and started slowly going back into work. And then, when the squadron came back, just went back into the rotation, ended up deploying 2 more times. And then started having seizures after that. So I had a chicken or egg thing, did I have seizures because I was epileptic or, epileptic and had seizures type thing. But so had seizures, and then that kind of forced me out of the deployable operational side of the unit into support role.
So you had just mentioned the jihadis, and I want to get into that because I think young people, kind of as we talked about a moment ago, who certainly weren't alive, maybe fail to understand what you're talking about when you're talking about jihadis and how they're different than maybe what people perceive as a standard enemy. So can you explain to the audience the difference between a loyalist to the regime and someone who is a violent jihadi terrorist?
Yeah, when you look at the loyalists to the regime, they had, their first thing was their country and everything else. Granted, they were, not the most, not that their country Iraq wasn't run smoothly. It was a dictatorship, everything else going on within there, but it was still about Iraq and everything else. So there was some loyalty just as a country, but with the folks coming in, the religious fundamentalists, they're out just to kill Christians, and because they hate, Christians. And it really stinks because of the fact that for them, it was like, well, the great jihad is now called basically go to war because, now it's like they've got to get rid of, the all us Christians and everybody else, just the folks in the Middle East that aren't supposed to be there in their mind. And so that was kind of their call to arms worldwide. And we ran into folks, all over that we've either captured or killed that were definitely not from Iraq. So it's, different. I mean, it's just a crazy thing, but it was really a call to arms. We hit a safe house one time in 03, October 31st, actually 03, when we were in Baghdad, and we went all the way out to Ramadi, and the guys all had the same jogging pants, shoes, and everything. And what they had done is they come over there for the jihad, so they take their passports and they can't leave. So now they got control of them and they can't leave the country. So they kind of get them in on this whole thought, oh yeah, you're going to come in, you're going to do this, and then all of a sudden they take them, and then they start, kind of like just keeping them to do what they need them to do and talking them into other things and so forth. And some of them, are all about it. I don't know, it's just crazy.
When you would get into gunfights and engagements with those guys, I mean, were they competent fighters? Were they skilled in any way? Or were they just kind of idiots who got their hands on an AK and had this sadistic mindset? I mean, were they able to put up a really good fight?
I think, you had some, like anything, that had some experience, and then some that were just coming over there wanting to get their jihad, and then they would get whatever training when they, either arrived in the country before they came directly into Iraq. So whatever the rat line was. But as we progressed down the road, they started having experienced fighters, and they started doing their lessons learned. So it became a more hardened fighter, especially with ISIS. They were a ruthless, ruggedized military in a way. So, they definitely had some war hardened individuals.
Did you feel when you're fighting the jihadis, the people that are intent on killing, the Christian members of the Christian faith, people that they didn't feel belong there, did it feel more justified to you? Did it feel like it was more important maybe than fighting, again, the regime loyalists? Because, and I'm only speaking for myself here, when I see that level of barbaric behavior, and you're talking about Zarqawi chopping people's heads off and people drilling holes into other people's skulls. I see that as a guy who's just some bystander, and I say that's not even human behavior. That's
Right.
what rabid dogs do. And I would think I would much rather prefer to take them out, and it would feel better for me, again, as an unbiased observer, than just the standing Iraqi army. Did you feel the same way, or was it equal to you?
Yeah, I think because things, you know, transitioned from that regime side to that fundamentalist side. So we also had to change some of our tactics and our procedures and everything else and how we did things to cope with these guys, because they were coming up with some ingenious ways of doing things along the line as well, with some of the IEDs, some of the, you know, the booby trapping the houses, things like that, using the cell phones to call to detonate everything. So it became, I think, as much as you say, more violent in that way, because with the regime guys too, we knew that there was the end state was trying to get Saddam, so that we needed intel as well. We needed to gather that intelligence. There was only so much that was there from previous, you know, just historical data. Then we had to actually make it real intel and workable intel. But with the fundamentalists, you know, if you gave them a chance to vote, and we'd say vote based off, okay, does this guy want to is he going to go along with the capture, or is he wanting to fight? And then let's see who wins. You know, they would rather fight than do anything. There was, you know, so many times guys would detonate suicide vests, because it's like, well, they're not going to take me, clack themselves off, thinking they're killing, you know, other folks around them. But, you know, they just, I don't know, they just were different folks. And it was like we had to get more violent in a way, you know, because again, we were going after intel and doing things, and our procedures and everything on the battlefield just had to kind of adjust, just like they were doing.
That's crazy. I truly cannot imagine. And I was in college. I started college in 2010. So I was in high school when things were getting kind of real bad in the 06, 07 era. And I remember people would always talk about, like, you know, do we really need to be fighting these guys? Are they really that bad? And I'm like, you know, this Zarqawi guy is literally chopping people's heads off, right? And don't think it stops there. Like, if this guy could, he'd chop all of our heads off too. Fortunately, they dropped a couple bombs on him, I believe, if I recall correctly. I have a question. Playing off what you just said, I have a question. It wasn't even written down, but in a previous interview I did, also with a guy who was with Chris Van Zandt, Brad Thomas.
Brad, yeah.
He was saying how there's some people on social media who use ambiguity to try to convince people.
Yes.
Now, he said this in the interview, and he didn't name names. He's like, I don't want to name, I'm not interested in getting that. But that they try to get the audience to be like, oh, I'll drop these little breadcrumbs, and then I just won't clear up confusion. When you see people on Instagram or Twitter, whatever, who maybe exaggerate their military service, is it easy for you to identify? And then what do you think of those people?
Yeah, it's, I don't mean to overtalk, but yeah, it's easy to identify because we pretty much know them all. Does it bother me? Yeah, it bothers me, you know, but I get it. You know, guys are trying to make a living out there, right? And I'm all for it, you know. I don't like the ambiguity out there that, you know, you lead, you know, listeners or followers to think one thing, and, you know, that's not what you did, you know.
Right. I 100% agree. Like, what is wrong with saying I was there, but I was a support guy?
Yes, and the guys that are proud say that. The guys that are fucking proud and that are respected, they do say that.
Yeah, and that's my point, right? Like, our support guys were phenomenal at every level. And you got to understand that, right? Like, if you're a mechanic in the Army, okay, you can be a mechanic in the 82nd, and you can be responsible for knowing how to fix the headlights on a Humvee. It's the only thing you need to know. And you've only got 2 Humvees that you need to do it to, right? So you sit around and play cards most of the time. Or you can come to the unit, and you're responsible to know how to fix every vehicle on God's green earth, and you're in charge of a fleet of 30 or 40 vehicles, right? And you're not making more, right? They are taking on much more responsibility because they want it, but because they want to work there, because they want to support the operator, because it's important to them. and that's the kind of quality you get in the support there. I mean, it's phenomenal.
Well, and that's why that goes into why these guys that are like kind of riding on the coattails and like they're not saying they weren't operators, but they're kind of making it sound like it, and then they're getting these big followers. There's nothing wrong with saying I was a fucking support guy. You know, I mean, like look at the direct support guys. They're doing everything that we're doing basically on target. I mean, they're coming on every target with us. But,
100%.
but they know that they can make money. They know they can get followers by just saying, you know, I was at the unit. And then most people just think if you're at the unit, you were an operator, which isn't true.
Right. Because if I was and I wasn't in the military at all, but I find all of this shit so cool. And even if I was just a support guy or a dude changing the headlights, like to me, that'd be the coolest fucking thing ever still. And like, I would just say that. And like, I could tell, and I've asked some other people, I can tell it hits a nerve with some people and they're like, essentially, again, it's lying through omission. You're just not telling the full truth. But anyways, I just wanted to get
the reason I think why it pisses us off is like you're taking away from all the stuff that we've done and that we've completed and we got selected. And now even though you had your own selection process, you had to be the best at what you were doing, but by letting other people think that you were an operator, it takes away from what you've actually done, right?
It ain't right. It just ain't right.
It's just not right. Yeah.
And I'll say that, you know, the majority of people I've seen doing that were not people that were at the unit for very long.
Right. 100%. Yep.
So, you know, that's one of the first things I look at when I try to figure out if somebody's full of shit, right? If they're like, I was in SEAL Team 6, I'm like, well, what years were you there? If they were there for 10 years, probably a good dude, right? They're like, I was in the unit in the 90s. How long? 96 to 98. Okay. Good to know.
Well, that's actually a great segue because my very next question is, how'd you find out about the unit? And I want to preface that when I interview guys who got into Delta in the 90s and maybe stayed through like 2009, 2010, a lot of them make the comment like, we didn't even know the thing existed. Like we weren't aware until someone told us. We didn't know when we joined the military. Were you aware of what the unit was and what they did? I assume you must have been because you were deploying as a Green Beret in a time of war.
Yeah, but I never saw those guys. They were still mythical figures, you know, overseas that you never worked with, you never saw. The only time I really even knew that it existed is because the Q course happens on Bragg, and at the end of this road is, you know, supposedly where the unit's at, you know, and at some point, you know, probably every Q course student drives down that road just to see the building at the end of that road. So I knew it existed because of, you know, being on Bragg. But oddly enough, I knew it existed more because Eric Haney wrote a book called Inside Delta Force while I was in the Q course. And I read every special operations book I could get a hold of, you know, while I was in the Q course, basically from Vietnam to more current era. And so as soon as that thing came out, I read it in like 30 hours. So I was well aware of the unit thanks to that book.
And for our viewers who might not know, that book by Eric Haney was the inspiration of the old CBS TV show, The Unit, in like the mid 2000s.
Right. Yeah. It was a great book. I mean, if I like I said, I remember reading it in the Q course. And so at the time, you know, I wasn't worried about going to the unit. I was just going to be happy to be a Green Beret. So it wasn't, you know, till years later that I got to selection, but I remembered those stories of selection from his book that were, and that's what most people are mad at him about is he talked about selection, and that's something we just don't talk about.
Right. No, I've heard, well, there's plenty of articles online about how that drove a wedge between him and a lot of other people, which we'll have a question about that later in the interview, kind of on a very similar topic. When you finally get there, you've passed selection, you've done all the stuff you got to do to go in. One of the things I'm curious about, is it better to be really smart if you want to make the unit, or is it better to be a freak of nature athlete? Do you need a blend? Like if a young man's watching this right now, he's like, I want to do what Brent Tucker did. Better to be smart, better to be tough. What?
That's a good question, because to be honest with you, I mean, the cliche answer is both, and that is an actual answer, as cliche as it is. But I've you won't see a lot of guys that aren't very smart, make it to the unit. But I've seen guys that they were just smart enough, but man, were they strong, and they're just gonna power their way through everything. And I would argue we need those guys, but that's definitely not the bulk of our force. And most guys really are both. Like, the smartest guys I've ever worked with are over at the unit.
And how long after you get through all the training, the selection, OTC, all that stuff, was it before you then actually deployed as a member, as an operator of Delta?
It was just a couple months. I went right into a pre-deployment and right into a deployment. Of course, at that time, and and to take a step back, one of the reasons I went there is because I wanted to keep deploying. 20th group, be a National Guard group, at the end of the day, deployed, if you wanted to, deployed as much as anyone else. I mean, as I could just raise my hand and go overseas, which is what I did a lot. But Iraq had gone away. Afghanistan, the writing on the wall on Afghanistan. At the time, I didn't think Afghanistan was going away, but combat operations in Afghanistan were getting harder and harder and harder to get out the gate. And so, the two reasons I went was I wasn't done going to war. I wanted to, keep deploying, and two, I didn't want to retire, thinking, what if? And I tell people all the time, I wasn't the best guy on my ODA. There were probably two guys, if you asked me, that I thought, if you asked me who was the best guy on my ODA, I'd probably put two guys ahead of me, and that's the truth. But they didn't go to selection for whatever reason, and maybe they would have made it, maybe they wouldn't have. The selection's a crazy process. I've seen guys that I knew in SF there at selection that I knew were better than me that didn't make it to the end. And for the life of me, I don't know why they didn't, and I don't know why I did. And sometimes that's just it's just how life deals you cards.
So it was a few months, and it just worked perfectly to where she and I were ready to go when we did, and that was a brutal deployment.
And is that your first is that the deployment in 06 that's covered in the documentary?
Yes, that's the first one. She and I went on two. She was killed on the second one. But yeah, that first one, we had over 50% casualties, not killed, but in our group.
Let's talk about that deployment where you had 50%. Did you say 50% casualties?
Yeah, we just had a list on the whiteboard of, there was 3 or 4 killed. That was summer of 06. And then, all the shot and wounded it came to over 50% of our squadron.
That's absolutely insane. For the audience listening to this, that means 50% of the guys there were either wounded or killed in action, which is a staggering number. Is the reason for that you guys are just doing the frequency of the hits is just at such a high level that you're taking contact on a regular basis?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just, we got this target deck we're trying to get to. So you go out on something, it leads to another, in 100 days, you're doing 90, 100, 110 hits, not including follow on. So it's just nonstop every night. It's great. I mean, but yeah, at the beginning too, it was just, we're figuring them out. They're figuring us out. I think I heard Chile say in one of your interviews that they're smart, or maybe it was Jesse, they know what they're doing. It's a different kind of war.
Chile had said they had come up with some pretty ingenious ways to figure out how to kill Americans, and that they had to adapt. I think, and then Chile's exact quote, and I apologize if he's watching this, I get it wrong, that it forced the Americans to adapt and get a little more violent because all the suicide bombings, all the booby traps they were laying out. Is that the same experience you had as well?
Yeah, And I had to be taught that by my team leader, I'm like sort of, going with our culture, we'd have some detainees and I'm like, okay, guys, like my team leader's like, hey, like you just said, speed, surprise, violence of action. If we sacrifice any of those, you have to make it up somewhere else. So there's pretty much no more surprise. And yeah, we can go with speed, but yeah, they figured out how to stop us because the dog engages.
How did you personally handle being on a team that lost 50% of its, or had a 50% casualty rate? I mean, that must weigh on your mind and your heart. Or is it a thing where you don't have time to think about it because you're just constantly going back out there?
It's actually like a prideful thing. Like we don't get to choose our wars. And every guy, I guarantee, wants something like World War II. Like, I mean, once you get to where we got, we know what we can do. I had nightmares of my own Delta troop coming against me when I got home because there's no chance. When a troop hits a building, like you're done. So, where were we at?
Just how you handle the trauma of losing that many guys.
It's like a prideful. I mean, we had it on the board. It's just like, okay. I mean, yeah, it hurts, but like, we got to go harder. I came home. My daughter was born in 2005. We were on a rotation. I came home for a month. It was awesome. The Delta just loves their people. People are the most important thing. It's the best place in the world to work, we would always say. And I came home and two of my buddies were killed while I was home. And then I come back and another one's killed. So you just go harder. Like are we going to win or not? And yeah, it's like a pride thing, I think.
When your friends die, and we're going to get into the very next thing we're going to talk about, Pepper, the second deployment. But you say you're going harder, but does it become more personal as well? Or is it always just strictly business? Because as a civilian, if someone killed my friends and I had the opportunity to kick in a door, and I'm not trying to be a fake tough guy, I don't do any of that stuff, obviously. But if you killed my family members, if you killed my friends, like it'd become a personal thing to me. It wouldn't be business anymore. How did you process that?
Just like you said, like actually there was a time where we caught a recidivist. We had captured some guys, tried to put them through their legal system. I remember once there was a ranger that got shot right above his plate right here. And we just got there and there's this huge puddle of blood. And the guys, we found them and they're surrendering because they won't fight. And they were laughing at us. And that's when I was like, man, this has got to change. Hey, boss, your intent, commander's intent says kill or capture, right? Yes. Okay. In that order, and I like to ask the question with Osama bin Laden. They shot him. There was no, and nobody disagrees with that.
Right.
Right. So what is it? If you kill 3,000 people, that's okay. Where's the line for just going in to kill somebody? It's tough freaking business. And somebody said, anybody can kill a caveman. How many cavemen have you killed, sir? Because it's tough and it's not natural, but yeah, man, like you said, when your friends get killed or a dog gets killed, it's like, it's unspoken. I mean, we just get back to our building, we eat, we watch TV, nobody's talking. And then when we go out again, it's just an unspoken thing. And yes, it's brutal.
So you had just mentioned the jihadis, and I want to get into that because I think young people, kind of as we talked about a moment ago, who certainly weren't alive, maybe fail to understand what you're talking about when you're talking about jihadis and how they're different than maybe what people perceive as a standard enemy. So can you explain to the audience the difference between a loyalist to the regime and someone who is a violent jihadi terrorist?
Yeah, when you look at the loyalists to the regime, they had, their first thing was their country and everything else. Granted, they were, not the most, not that their country was, Iraq wasn't run smoothly. It was a dictatorship, everything else going on within there, but it was still about Iraq and everything else. So there was some loyalty just as a country, but with the folks coming in, the religious fundamentalists, they're out just to kill Christians, and because they hate, Christians. And it really stinks because of the fact that for them, it was like, well, the great jihad is now called basically go to war because, now it's like they've got to get rid of, the all us Christians and everybody else, just the folks in the Middle East that aren't supposed to be there in their mind. And so that was kind of their call to arms worldwide. And we ran into folks, all over that we've either captured or killed that were definitely not from Iraq. So it's, different. I mean, it's just a crazy thing, but it was really a call to arms. We hit a safe house one time in 03, October 31st, actually 03, when we were in Baghdad, and we went all the way out to Ramadi, and the guys all had the same jogging pants, shoes, and everything. And what they had done is they come over there for the jihad, so they take their passports and they can't leave. So now they got control of them and they can't leave the country. So they kind of get them in on this whole thought, oh yeah, you're going to come in, you're going to do this, and then all of a sudden they take them, and then they start, kind of like just keeping them to do what they need them to do and talking them into other things and so forth. And some of them are all about it. I don't know, just crazy.
When you would get into gunfights and engagements with those guys, I mean, were they competent fighters? Were they skilled in any way, or were they just kind of idiots who got their hands on an AK and had this sadistic mindset? I mean, were they able to put up a really good fight?
I think, you had some, like anything, that had some experience, and then some that were just coming over there wanting to get their jihad, and then they would get whatever training when they, either arrived in the country before they came directly into Iraq. So whatever the rat line was. But as we progressed down the road, they started having experienced fighters, and they started doing their lessons learned. So it became a more hardened fighter, especially with ISIS. I mean, they were a ruthless, ruggedized military in a way. So, they definitely had some war hardened individuals.
Did you feel when you're fighting the jihadis, the people that are intent on killing, the Christian members of the Christian faith, people that they didn't feel belong there, did it feel more justified to you? Did it feel like it was more important maybe than fighting, again, the regime loyalists? Because, and I'm only speaking for myself here, when I see that level of barbaric behavior, and you're talking about Zarqawi chopping people's heads off and people drilling holes into other people's skulls, I see that as a guy who's just some bystander, and I say, that's not even human behavior. That's right. What rabid dogs do. And I would think I would much rather prefer to take them out, and it would feel better for me, again, as an unbiased observer, than just the standing Iraqi army. Did you feel the same way, or was it equal to you?
Yeah, I think because things, transitioned from that regime side to that fundamentalist side. So we also had to change some of our tactics and our procedures and everything else, and how we did things to cope with these guys, because they were coming up with some ingenious ways of doing things along the line as well, with some of the IEDs, some of the, the booby trapping the houses, things like that, using the cell phones to call to detonate everything. So it became, I think, as much as you say, more violent in that way, because with the regime guys too, we knew that there was the end state was trying to get Saddam, so that we needed intel as well. We needed to gather that intelligence. There was only so much that was there from previous, just historical data. Then we had to actually make it real intel and workable intel. But with the fundamentalists, if you gave them a chance to vote, and we'd say vote based off, okay, does this guy want to is he going to go along with the capture, or is he wanting to fight? And then let's see who wins. They would rather fight than do anything. There was, so many times guys would detonate suicide vests, because it's like, well, they're not going to take me, clack themselves off, thinking they're killing, other folks around them. But, they just, I don't know, they just were different folks. And it was like we had to get more violent in a way. because again, we were going after intel and doing things, and our procedures and everything on the battlefield just had to kind of adjust just like they were doing.
I've heard some people say that the biggest misconception about that particular unit is that, everyone thinks it's from the outside, they think it's like ninjas, but in reality, they're just unbelievably amazing at the basics and the fundamentals, and they never screw the fundamentals up. Would you agree with that take, who was told to me by a guy from that unit?
100%. Masters of the basics. Masters of the base. I'm a firm believer in acquiring fundamental and basic skills. From the time as a kid, communicating, getting along with people, being basic, fundamental, and skills. And the unit members, I've never seen such exactness in the application of basic skills in my life. I've never seen such exactness. It was clockwork, machines in action, getting the job done on the combat field, off the in every aspect. It was amazing to me. It was amazing.
What's it like operating in a country that is essentially divided by 5, 6, however many different factions? You got the United States, you have the Assad regime, you have the Russians who are in there, you have Iranian assets that are in there, you got ISIS that's in there. How the hell do you even know? I mean, how do you know the Russians aren't just going to try rolling through wherever you are?
Well, they tried that once and it didn't work out. It didn't work out well for them. I was there for that. Here's something that this will make some people mad, but the truth is the truth, that I believe generals hide behind, and to be honest with you, and so do politicians. They hide behind this lie whenever something they'll say, well, it's really complicated. It's actually not that complicated. ISIS was bad. The Kurds were good. The ISIS was on this side, and we'll just keep killing everyone on that side until we get to Raqqa and we free Raqqa. Syria wasn't a problem. Syria, the whole reason why ISIS was able to take over half of Syria is because the Syrian army was just inept. And the Syrian army, stayed over on the western side, and they didn't have the ability, they weren't going to go toe to toe with Americans I believe they were more than willing to let America rid their country of the ISIS problem, and then they'll get their country back through political means, because they know, America's going to give it back to them anyway, because we're always politically spineless. So that, I believe that was their goal, which basically worked out for them. The Russians were just there to do, was just there to stir things up. But I never worried about the Russians, being a part of the problem. The different factions, a slight problem with the different factions, because who's a friend one day is an enemy the next. But that generally wasn't a problem, because that really didn't happen within the Kurds. And so as long as you just stayed with the Kurds are really good partners. The Kurds were the best partners we've ever had. They were way better than the Afghans and way better than the Iraqis. They were more than willing to fight for their cause. All they wanted was guns and ammo, and point in the direction of the enemy, and they as best they could go take care of the problem. I really respected the Kurds.
That's great to hear, and I've only ever heard good things. I'm sure you can't get into details at all. I know exactly the engagement you're referring to with the Russians. You don't have to talk about. I won't ask you to talk about it because you mentioned it. Do you ever sit back, and for anyone watching this, you can Google it. You'll find out about it in 10 seconds. Do you ever sit back and think to yourself, I can't believe I was a part of something in so many ways that was historic?
Yeah, it actually happened twice. I was a part of the second skirmish, and what'll hit the news big is the first one.
Gotcha.
And rightfully so. And so yeah, the first one was the big news worthy one. Yeah, just go Google it. But again, it's in the news. I'll talk about it a little bit, but I tell you what's kind of crazy is getting, being a small team and getting an intel brief about how to about all the different Russian tanks and Syrian tanks that are in the area. That was definitely a first, and going, what are we doing? Like this, we're not the team that goes up against tanks. Although ironically enough, we've taken out more than I don't know, maybe more than anyone else. Just out of the skirmishes that we've been in and the places we've been. That's not true. Invasion of Iraq, ODAs took out a lot of tanks through javelins, but we've had our fair share with javelins, and it was definitely a crazy brief and a crazy time. You don't really think that you're going to go toe to toe with the Russians, so to speak. But Syria was a wild time.
How did you personally handle being on a team that lost 50% of its, or had a 50% casualty rate? I mean, that must weigh on your mind and your heart. Or is it a thing where you don't have time to think about it because you're just constantly going back out there?
It's actually like a prideful thing. Like we don't get to choose our wars. And every guy, I guarantee you, wants something like World War II. Like, I mean, once you get to where we got, we know what we can do. I had nightmares of my own Delta troop coming against me when I got home, because there's no chance. When a troop hits a building, like you're done. So, where were we at?
Just how you handle the trauma of losing that many guys.
It's like a prideful. I mean, we had it on the board. It's just like, okay. I mean, yeah, it hurts, but like, we got to go harder. I came home. My daughter was born in 2005. We were on a rotation. I came home for a month. It was awesome. The Delta just loves their people. People are the most important thing. It's the best place in the world to work, we would always say. And I came home and two of my buddies were killed while I was home. And then I come back and another one's killed. So you just go harder. Like are we going to win or not? And yeah, it's like a pride thing, I think.
When your friends die, and we're going to get into the very next thing we're going to talk about, Pepper, the second deployment. But you say you're going harder, but does it become more personal as well? Or is it always just strictly business? Because as a civilian, if someone killed my friends and I had the opportunity to kick in a door, and I'm not trying to be a fake tough guy, I don't do any of that stuff, obviously. But if you killed my family members, if you killed my friends, like it'd become a personal thing to me. It wouldn't be business anymore. How did you process that?
Just like you said, like actually there was a time where we caught a recidivist. We had captured some guys, tried to put them through their legal system. I remember once there was a ranger that got shot right above his plate right here, and we just got there and there's this huge puddle of blood, and the guys, we found them and they're surrendering because they won't fight, and they were laughing at us. And that's when I was like, man, this has got to change. Hey boss, your intent, commander's intent says kill or capture, right? Yes. Okay. In that order, and I like to ask the question with Osama bin Laden. They shot him. There was no, and nobody disagrees with that.
Right.
Right. So what is it? If you kill 3,000 people, that's okay. Where's the line for just going in to kill somebody? It's tough freaking business. And somebody said, anybody can kill a caveman. How many cavemen have you killed, sir? Because it's tough and it's not natural, but Yeah, man. Like you said, when your friends get killed or a dog gets killed, it's like, it's unspoken. I mean, we just get back to our building, we eat, we watch TV. Nobody's talking. And then when we go out again, it's just an unspoken thing. And yes, it's brutal.
We've got 2 questions left. This interview has lived up to all the expectation. I'm having an absolute blast getting into all this. A while ago, when we did our first interview, you sent me some photos to use for thumbnails, and there were different ones of you in like night vision, guns, and stuff. One of them was you and a bunch of dudes. They all had their faces blurred out, but I never actually posted this photo on any thumbnail we published. But you all had birthday hats on. And I'm just wondering, just because I'm sure the audience, and I'll figure out a way to flash on the screen, I'm sure the audience is going to be very curious, why were a bunch of SEAL Team 6 operators wearing party hats, if you will? What can you tell us about the backstory to that photo?
Dude, it's the brotherhood, man. So part of the sacrifice is doesn't matter what holiday, birthday thing, you're missing all that stuff. It's part of your purpose. You have to. So you got your boys, and you do your best to, even if shit was bad that night or hard or whatever, is like little moments where somebody thought of something and they're like, you know what, dude, it's New Year's Day right now, and we're out after this bad guy. I'm going to stuff some party hats in my cargo pocket and make my buddies make them laugh for 5 seconds. Right. So, hey, everything was cool. Right. Hey, quick, get on the radio. Everybody get in here. Party hats. Boom. We have New Year's. We fly home. And it's, I gave I don't even remember who it was. It wasn't me. Gave us 5 seconds of just a little bit of joy together, and on that night.
So that photo was taken on an actual hit.
Yeah. New Year's.
That's incredible. That's one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Good for you. I will make sure that photo gets posted. Give me 1 second here.
Yeah.
It's an important reminder that even if things aren't going well, like you said, like take a couple seconds.
Yeah.
Have a little fun. Have a reason to smile. I think that's good life advice in general, whether you're a Navy SEAL or not. All right. Last question here. This is what I want to close out on. I just recently had a conversation with a guy by the name of Chili Palmer, who served in the Army's SMU. And he was saying a lot of the same stuff you're saying right now about how he felt that the jihadis he was fighting, mostly, I believe, in Iraq, their sole intent wasn't defending their country. It wasn't defending their government. It wasn't defending their people, if you will, like a traditional army might. It was, I'm going to kill and blow up as many Westerners, as many Christians as I possibly can, and I'm going to kill and maim anyone who helps them. In your experience, was that the same mentality you experienced encountering Islamic terror?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is some distinction there. Like they're the true believers, the guy that are actually, the foreign fighters, the guys that would travel, the guys that are legitimately there to fight. There's that element. And then there's the dirt farmer that is not making any money. We destroyed his crops, so maybe he's not super happy with us. And then some, Taliban guy gives him $100 and says, hey man, dig a hole and put a mine here. So there is some of that's just kind of, economic opportunity. There's also the guys that just don't like us there. As we would experience if we had foreign occupiers here. Right. And I mean, that's what we were doing there. We were occupying their country. As much as we want to say we were liberating them or, whatever, it's, they sure didn't see it that way. So there was some of that element, but yeah, all the hardcore guys, the more senior guys, absolutely. They're doing it for jihad, right? For the cause of Allah. One of the interesting things about Islam is that as a good Muslim, you do not have assurance of salvation, right? So as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, I know where I'm going to go, not because of anything that I've done, because of what Christ did on the cross for me and me accepting that and, and me repenting and following out, making God Lord of my life, right? That makes me a Christian. And God cannot change his character, right? He is who he is. Well, the Muslim doesn't believe that. They believe that as Christians, we put God in a box by saying that he cannot change his character. One of the 99 names of Allah is the father of lies. And so they think that you could be a good Muslim and, you know, I guess Allah's having a bad day that day and you're going to hell. However, there's one way around that, and that's dying as a shaheed or as a martyr. So that is a big motivator for a lot of those guys, is that they want to die. I mean, and I think about it if I really believed that, man, I would, you know, if that was the only way to assure that you had salvation, man, I would really want to make sure that I actually died in battle like that, died for the cause, because, because otherwise it's just, you're leaving it up to chance. So yeah, a lot of those guys were very, very serious. You know, they are following the Quran, right? When they go and they take jihad, they're following the Quran when they first keep it in, you know, what they call, the Dar al-Islam, right? The lands that are already subjugated by Islam. They're supposed to kick us out of there first, and then they're supposed to take the jihad to the Dar al-Harb, which is, you know, the land of war, which is any of the lands that are not controlled by Islam. You know, and ultimately all the hardcore guys, their goal is to establish a worldwide Islamic caliphate.
Right, exactly. And that,
Because the dog engages.
how did you personally handle being on a team that lost 50% of its, or had a 50% casualty rate? I mean, that must weigh on your mind and your heart. Or is it a thing where you don't have time to think about it because you're just constantly going back out there?
It's actually like a prideful thing. Like, we don't get to choose our wars. And every guy, I guarantee, you know, wants something like World War II. Like, I mean, once you get to where we got, we know what we can do. You know, I had nightmares of my own Delta troop coming against me when I got home, because there's no chance. When a troop hits a building, like, you're done. It's like a prideful, I mean, we had it on the board. It's just like, okay, I mean, yeah, it hurts, but like, we got to go harder. You know, I came home, my daughter was born in 2005. We were on a rotation. I came home for a month. It was awesome. You know, that Delta just loves their people. People are the most important thing. It's the best place in the world to work, we would always say. And I came home and you know, 2 of my buddies were killed while I was home. And then I come back and another one's killed. So you just go harder. Like, that's, are we going to win or not? And yeah, it's like a pride thing, I think.
Does it feel better killing someone like that compared to maybe, you know, a regime loyalist, or maybe I hear a lot of guys talk about some of the guys they fought in Afghanistan. They almost, I wouldn't say feel bad for them, but they're like, is this guy purely evil? Maybe, maybe not. But they all say when it came to ISIS, it just felt better. Would you agree with that?
I would. I mean, the way I would rate it, if you will, and everyone will have a different, you know, experience and a different answer. You know, in Iraq, sometimes we were in the middle of, you know, of a civil war. You know, at some point, you know, that at the Afghanistan, I respected the guys in Afghanistan. They, you know, they always come out to fight. You know, they're at least willing to die for their cause. But man, I really, really, really hated ISIS. I never walked by a dead ISIS body with anything other than just joy.
Were those
I know that sounds weird, but
no, it doesn't sound weird. No, it doesn't sound weird at all.
Yeah.
You know, ISIS presented it, and I'm enjoying this a lot. I think our viewers are going to be fascinated by this, especially the younger ones. ISIS they projected, you know, we're so tough, we're so violent, you can't reach the level that we get to. If you captured any of these guys, did they drop the tough guy act pretty quickly, or did they try to maintain that in custody?
You had a good mix of like some of the foreign fighters that would come through, that they were they were tenacious, and they'd look at you like, man, if you'd take these flex cuffs off me, I'd choke the life out of you right now. I mean, they just stare at you with dead eyes. Yeah, you get a mixture of everything. And there are plenty of ISIS fighters on the front lines, especially when the march to Raqqa was going on, that they didn't want to be on the front lines, but it was either stay on the front lines and fight, or or retreat and get killed by ISIS. And you could still say, well, you still enjoyed watching them die, because yeah, like they raised their hand to come fight for evil, and then they found out what evil was, and so you already voted, you came to do this, and now be careful what you wish for.
I had someone tell me, outside of an interview, that DEVGRU is more fun, but the unit is where the real hitters are at. But everyone's turned on at all times, and that can be very, very stressful because there's no down moments. There's no mistakes tolerated. Was that your experience, that there was very little room for error when you're in the Army's SMU?
Well, I think in both places, with DEVGRU and us, everybody was there for a reason. Everybody wanted to excel and to be in the top spot. Granted, we always make fun of each other. I mean, it's the fighting with the stepbrother type thing,
Right.
but I think on both sides equally, guys wanted to do the job and do everything. They had a better place to live, definitely Virginia Beach over Fayetteville. But I think also, yeah, they were a little bit more lax in a different way, not in a bad way, but then, we had still the camaraderie, everything else. A lot of guys were, Rangers, so they grew up under that Roger Sergeant. I mean, and then you had the SF guys but we all kind of knew what was what, and we knew what the job was, and we focused on that, but we still had a great time. And I think it was a true family, because like before we deploy, the whole squadron get together, things like that with the families. And, a lot of parties along the way in and around, but, you guys got a lot of strong-willed guys, and everybody's there. It's like being in the NFL.
You're not the first person to ever make that comparison. I think it's a very fair and it's an easy one for the audience to understand. But on that note, guys get cut from NFL teams. Mm-hmm. They get cut because they're not performing. They get cut maybe because they're a cancer in the locker room. Is that the same thing when you're talking about dealing with the tip of the spear level units, where if a guy just doesn't mesh, is it like, hey, you might have gotten here through selection, you might have gone through the OTC, and maybe you've even deployed with us, but this is not a good fit? What do you do when a guy just does not belong ultimately?
That has happened, and it's sad. But it is just the way it goes, and especially when you're then at that level and that time, doing continuous combat operations. But you got to counsel guys. It's not like corporate America where all of a sudden you just get hijacked and HR's on the phone and, oh, you're fired. The military still has a little bit of a way that you still have to get some counseling. Granted, if something is really severe, that decision can be made at that point because of the fact we know I can't trust this person in combat. But you try to mentor guys, get them in the right way, but then some guys it's just not for them. They may succeed back in the range regiment, but not there at the unit because it's a little different as far as, a little bit freer when we say about having that relaxed standards when it comes to the really, yes sergeant, no sergeant, and so forth. Everybody's a first name basis really. So some guys just can't deal with some of that stuff. And then when you look at, selection, that tests a lot of things as an individual. And some guys just can't do that. So a lot of guys get washed out in selection because they need somebody to tell them how well they're doing, how, hey, you only have this much left to go. So, hey, good job, buddy, and stuff like that. And, really it's just don't be late, light, or out of uniform. And what we used to also kind of say is it's harder to stay in the unit than it is to get there.
I've heard other people say that too. Yep. That's crazy. But I mean, it's tough for the viewers and me to understand that because we're not there, right? Like we don't understand the standard that you and your old teammates are held to.
Got you. So I want to jump now to 2001, September 11, 2001. I was in 4th grade for it. A lot of people watching this show are very young. Some of them weren't even alive when 9/11 happened. Do you remember specifically where you were when the towers were hit?
Yeah, I was, we were in Stansted, England, an Air Force base, a British Air Force base. I was in BCO 175. I was now a staff sergeant. And we were there with A Squadron, and we were doing kind of a show of force rehearsal missions. At the time, there was an election in Montenegro that wasn't going well. I didn't have all the details, but we were doing like these rehearsal missions in case something would happen, in the Balkans type thing. I remember we went out and we're doing this rehearsal, came back, and A Squadron was gone. And like, we had no idea what was going on. I remember there's we didn't have any access to TV or really anything. Probably someone in our company chain of command knew something. I just remember like the next morning, so they're 8 hours ahead. We, at some point we went to whatever the next meal was, I don't remember. And there's like this little 13-inch TV in that little restaurant. And I remember seeing replays of it, and that's when we found out what happened. And I remember we had to guard that base because we didn't know what was going on, and we couldn't get an aircraft home. Because, all the military aircraft was kind of grounded or used for other things. We couldn't get civilian aircraft. So we were basically issued live ammo and told to guard this base. Eventually, we went home as 3rd Ranger Battalion was passing. They kind of passed us in the air with elements of all B Squadron and elements of A Squadron to go to objective Rhino and objective Gecko. So got back home, and that was kind of where I was when 9/11 happened.
And were guys that you were around when 9/11 happened, was the feeling like, just find us some targets? Like, did you instantly want to get in the fight, or was there just so much chaos you didn't really have time to think about that?
Yes and no. I mean, it was a lot of chaos and just lack of information. At the time we didn't have a lot of, not just where we were, but there just wasn't a lot of internet access, period. Which seems crazy. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have any of that stuff. So that mainly came later when we started going into Afghanistan. Kind of Roberts Ridge happened, and some other things happened. And basically, my company, just because of the rotation and cycle, wasn't anything malicious or anything. We just never had the opportunity to go initially. On our battalion's turn, there was like an RF1 company, I think. That was like, if you were the battalion on call, then there was a company on double secret probation type thing. Yeah. And they got to go. So ACO went when Roberts Ridge happened. And after that, I was like, look, I'm not getting in the fight. So I had a bunch of friends that had gone to selection. And they were kind of the guys, not just friends, but mentors and stuff, and people that you're like, yeah, that guy is going to make it, and they would. And we had one of my friends went, never trained up for it, didn't do anything, and he came back like, did you make it? He's like, yeah. I'm like, holy crap, if that guy made it, there's nothing against him, but if he made it, it's possible for all of us. And then it was kind of like a mass exodus, and
So I want to jump in right away. We're going to get an action-packed question. For the three of you, you can start individually. Where were the fiercest gunfights? What were the fiercest combat you guys ever saw? Iraq, Afghanistan, take it away. Who wants to start?
Afghanistan, for sure, for me.
Yeah. Well, you go first, Bob. Yeah.
Yeah, Afghanistan, without a doubt. I think Iraq was cooler hits, but Afghanistan was where the gunfighting was. Al-Qaeda basically became big pussies in Iraq. So like, we'd come on target and they knew if they came out with their hands up, we had to arrest them basically, Afghanistan, like, especially with the Taliban, them motherfuckers were fighters. So every target we went on with Taliban, you knew you were getting in a gunfight pretty much. So Afghanistan was the place to be.
Yeah, so for me, I agree to a certain extent, but there's also the early days of Iraq were pretty badass.
Yeah, I missed. You had like the first 2 years before me, so I missed out on that.
Yeah, so I hit that perfect. I mean, I hit Afghanistan. I think I was on the third ODA put into Afghanistan, so I know what Bob's saying there too. But I definitely had a good time in early Iraq with the
well, yeah, I mean, and I'll agree, like the hits were way better in Iraq.
Yeah.
But would you say the fighters in Afghanistan were better than they were in Iraq?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
That's what I thought too. It just
so, for me, I freaking hate Afghanistan. I mean, there was some good gunfights in Afghanistan, but it was always like few and far between, right? Like, but go back to like 2006, Baghdad, Yusufia. I mean, we would go out and get in a gunfight every night. So that was, the surge happened in 2005. All of the AQ guys got pushed out of Baghdad, and they all went to Yusufia.
Yeah.
And we counted on a 90-day rotation. We would count the nights we didn't get in a gunfight, and it was usually, less than 20.
But see, I agree. Now, but I also agree. So I got into way more gunfights in Iraq, but where I feared for my life maybe a little bit more was maybe Afghanistan. Like I was giggling in Iraq, like having a good old time. But Afghanistan was like
dive into that. So what's the difference in fear there? Why are you more fearful in Afghanistan compared to Iraq? Is it because the Taliban were better fighters or what?
I think it was a little bit of everything. So it was a little bit of that, right? And it was a little bit of distance. So everything, it was a little bit more sketchy in Afghanistan, right? Because distances were greater. You didn't have as much support, right? So there are a multitude of factors. I did a lot of daylight stuff in Iraq, so it made it fun, the nighttime stuff, it obviously it gets a little bit more, it was sketchy, obviously everything under nods and everything, but I can see it from both fields of view for sure.
I would say that, like the Afghanistan thing, you were always going to somewhere remote, and it was more like a village of assholes coming after you, or several compounds of assholes coming after you. Whereas in Iraq, you're going
like a house
somewhere rural or something like that. Yeah. Most of the people around are just sitting in their house hoping you don't come in and kick them in the face. So it was. I think that was the bigger thing with Afghanistan was the outside threat when you were on target, which wasn't as big of a concern in Iraq.
Well, to your point about guys hoping you just don't kick them in the face when you come to the door, how difficult is it when you're in a country like Iraq or Afghanistan, wherever it might be, where you're not fighting uniformed soldiers, right? Like they don't look like the Germans in World War II. How many split decisions are you guys making to determine who's friendly and who's a bad guy trying to take you out?
Oof. Well, that is the question, right? So,
all the time.
Yeah, all the time, right? That's the answer. I mean, I got shot up in 2007, right? And it was from a guy who was dressed up as a woman. So in full head to toe, women garb, right? So it was kind of at that time where
they got shot because he was checking them out.
Shut your mouth, Bob. Shut your mouth. There's no such thing going on.
I'm just kidding.
So up until that point, they kind of changed the ROE on us. We did a lot of self internally. We checked all the people on target by ourselves and all that stuff. Well, obviously, there were some issues with that. That came up, us searching women. So then that became a no. And then hence the men started dressing up in women, right? Because that's what they do, is they come up with the next best answer to beat the Americans. And so it bit me in the ass. And that was kind of the first time we had seen it anywhere over there up until that point. So, I mean, it's always a big thing for sure.
Where were you hit when you got shot?
So I got it through the left forearm, and then I think it was the same bullet. The way I was angled, I think it went through my left forearm, and then it went into my left, like the left side of my gut, the left flank, I guess is the actual medical term. But
well, he got another guy right next to him too.
Yeah, and then my team leader got shot right through his trap. So perfect.
The only reason you got shot was because you were standing next to him.
Yeah, exactly. He's bad luck. He's a bad luck storm.
Now, did you know right away when you got hit that you'd been shot? Because I've seen some interviews where people are like, it took me a few seconds to recognize I'd been hit.
Nah, so here's the deal.
What did you say when you got shot?
Man, I yelled "fuck" pretty loud. I'll tell you that. But I let our element up, and it was that, we had hit a few buildings. That's how it always is, right? We had already hit our primary building. We had already hit a couple follow-ons. So this is like the freaking fourth building we were hitting, but I let up, and I knew I had my laser on this because ISR was saying it was a woman out there, and it looked like a decrepit old woman all hunched over. And I had my laser, and I was checking, and that dude turned his head, and I could see that 5 o'clock shadow, and I knew, shit, I was behind the power curve right there. And he just he had an AK under that dress and just dumped the whole magazine out.
Holy shit.
But I knew I got shot. I knew it.
Okay. And I'm assuming someone put that guy down immediately, right?
Yeah, we all did. Yeah.
That's a lot. So what about you, Nate? What's your experience when it comes to identifying those people who they could be dressed like civilians? Well, like, how difficult is that?
I mean, there's the obvious easy case where they got a gun, right? But that was probably a minority of the situations that were put in, where we could actually see the gun or see what you, some sort of threat. And I think it's just it's a culmination of experiences and kind of sensing that, something's wrong. Like, this person isn't acting correctly. This person isn't doing this or that. I remember, I think it was 2007, saw this guy pop out of a courtyard, a couple houses down while we were in Iraq. And it looked like he had like the boxing, diaper, that big padded boxing diaper. Looked like he was wearing that under his man jammies. And I'm like, did you guys see that? And everybody was like, no, I didn't see anything. He popped back out, and I shot him because I was positive he had a bomb on, bomb underwear. And then he did, right? And so it was the right call, but it's just one of those things that, if that had happened to me in 2003, we probably would have gotten IED. You know what I mean? Because it was just that he was acting funny. I could tell there was something under his clothes. When he came back out, started coming towards us, I knew something was wrong. So it was really hard in a lot of those situations to make that call, and it's just a matter of seeing things over and over and over again, I think.
How often are you actually having to pull the trigger on a target?
As a Green Beret, just the truth is not much. You get into a lot of firefights at distance. You're calling in CAS. You don't get close and personal with the enemy like I did a lot more often at the unit. There were definitely times, that's just always it's a risky job. So it's always, it could happen at any moment, and randomly it would, but it's hard to put a percentage on it, but most missions were easy missions. Most missions, not a shot was fired at all. Not without a doubt, not everybody died on every target. And when you really talk about my SF days in Iraq, and every theater is different. The guys came to fight in Afghanistan way more than they came to fight in Iraq with the target sets that we were going after. almost every target set in Iraq. Even though we knew the intel was good, it was our intel. Like we were certain, and we had the intelligence and the dual sourced reports, not just from one guy, but from several people saying, this is a bad guy, and these are all the things he did. And we'd hit his house in the middle of the night and either pull him out of his bedroom while he's hiding, or he's still asleep by the time you get to his room. The target set for us in Iraq was a lot of people giving up. I really think they'd rather fight it out in the court system than with the Americans, knowing that they'll win and they'll get out eventually, because we went after a lot of, fancy word, but recidivists, which are prior offenders.
But in Afghanistan, they were way more willing to take shots at you coming in.
Absolutely. And now, and I'm not saying that they're willing to fight it out toe to toe with you, but they love taking pop shots at you. They love shooting at you from the mountainside and at a distance. In Afghanistan, if you stay in one place long enough, they are going to come say hi to you, for sure. Which, just generally speaking, what wasn't the case in Iraq.
I want to ask now. So I gotta buffer this a little bit again. A few years ago, I was on a bachelor party, and we were discussing Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, the unit, all that good stuff. And someone told me, he's like, I know for a fact, this is what this guy said, I know for a fact, only Army guys are allowed in Delta Force. Only Army guys. And yet here I am currently right now, sitting with a man from the Marine Corps who went to the unit. So can you explain how that occurs? How do you go from being an officer in the Marines to joining the unit in Fort Bragg?
Yeah, well, the process, I was in the military at a time when organizations were opening up. They were understanding diversity and the importance of diversifying their organizations and units with different-minded people. And I'm all about a diversified workforce, by the way. I think that's very important with regards to mindsets and skill sets and even performance. And the Army opened up one of their specialized units, opened it up to other branches, Marine Corps being one. I heard about it, and there were so many billets available, and I heard about it. I submitted my paperwork, and then I took the interview process and then assessment and selection.
So I gotta ask, I gotta know, when you're a Marine and now you join the Army's SMU, what level of hazing goes on when you come from a different branch, or is there no hazing at all?
David, it's such a different level.
Yeah.
It's indescribable. Even to this day, I was privileged, honored, and blessed to serve at that organization, and it was nothing but professional warriors, professionals at all levels. And when you're operating at that level, there's no time except for work and getting the mission done. And the time I was there, it was spent working, getting the mission done. And there's some clown ops, I guess. I call them clown ops. Here's the crayon eater. Marines are known as crayon eaters. But it's all tongue in cheek and it's fun. And we have some fun moments, but there's high mutual respect for everyone there, because we all go through that rite of passage, through that assessment selection process, onward to the training course. And every day you're there, every second, every minute of every hour is a rite of passage. There's no time to get complacent at the unit.
I kind of respect people who fight and who don't. The ones that are just like, they actually do grab kids or women a lot and hide behind them, and you just shoot them. It's not like the movie's like, oh my gosh, they've got it. You just shoot them in the freaking head. That's why we train so much, man.
Right.
Like the movies need to catch up. They've gotten better, but like that doesn't happen. Like, dude, you're giving me your whole nugget there. I'm gonna just your brain's coming out of your head in about half a second. Okay, the reason I'm here and doing this and able to do this and will boldly tell any story and have guys back me up. I'm not going to embellish anything. I did hundreds and hundreds of hits. I have them all recorded. Killed many people and will never regret that. It's the best feeling, the most indescribable feeling to do your job, what you trained to do. Go in there, crush them. I mean, it's like winning a football game, or winning a football game is like that, but it's indescribable to do your job, and come in and they grab a kid and you just poke a hole in their head. Like the best sniper shot I ever took was 2 meters away. I never took a long, sexy shot. I was a sniper for a while, but this guy grabbed his wife and was rolling, using her for protection, and I'm moving. And I didn't think about it, which is why it was perfect. I just shot him and his brain came out in his wife's lap. It was the weirdest thing in the world.
What do you think it says about a man that would hide behind his wife?
It's a culture that is different.
I want to touch on the fundamentalists, the jihadi aspect of what you've seen or your teammates had seen. A lot of young people, I was in college when Iraq was kind of at the end, ISIS was starting to be a big thing. And I often heard, I use this example all the time, people would make excuses for some of the savagery that displayed, the beheadings, the rapes, the mutilations, things like that they're just misunderstood. Where we deserve a lot of the blame, their words, not mine. In your experience, as someone who's fought Saddam's uniformed soldiers and then fought people that engaged in that level of savagery, how do you mentally view it? Is it different to you, or does it make no difference whether you're just a regular uniformed soldier compared to an ideological suicide bomber?
I mean, personally, it made no difference to me. We obviously changed our tactics significantly, and without getting into any kind of special tactics that were used. I mean, if someone's just going to blow themselves up, I mean, let's take it from like a hostage rescue and then a uniformed military and then an ununiformed military. If it's a hostage rescue, which was our primary mission, my job is to put myself between the hostage and the hostage taker, whatever that means. If it's uniform military, you can kind of bank on that they're using some sort of military doctrine. You can segregate them from the populace. Just they look different, they act different, they have different equipment. And then if you have an insurgency that kind of just blends in everywhere and are willing to kill themselves just to disrupt how you're doing things, which is kind of true terror, then we're going to change our tactics. I don't want to be anywhere near that. So at one end of the spectrum, you have potentially me putting myself in front of a hostage I don't want to be anywhere near, like, why are we even going on target? I'm not saying that I didn't want to go on target, but can we just bomb this house? And,
right.
And that whole thing changed over time of what acceptable collateral damage was. And I'm not saying what the limit should be or shouldn't be, but, it definitely changed over time to, are we willing to sacrifice, ourselves as opposed to just standing off and either standing off the target by hundreds of meters or hundreds of miles and conducting the same mission.
We're going to do some photos, which we've been doing with all these interviews. For those of you watching on YouTube, you're going to be able to see these up on your screen. Brad is going to give us a quick little breakdown summary of the background story, and then we're going to jump into His music was Silence and Light. If you're listening on Spotify, head on over to YouTube for this segment because you're not going to want to miss these. First one up, it is you in a firehouse, Fire Department, New York, Engine 24, Ladder 5, Battalion 2, and you are holding what could best be described as kind of like a shadow box setup, American flag. I think that's a challenge coin in the middle, and then it's got the Fire Department patch. And it says, in 2005, I returned this FDNY patch to its rightful home, Ladder 5 in Greenwich Village. It was cut off of a dress uniform of a man who'd served in the Air Force, and then a sergeant to the NYPD, and lastly, as probationary fireman to FDNY. There they were sent, and this is interesting, by someone anonymous to Fort Bragg, along with a dozen or so other patches. To this day, nobody is clear on who sent it or how they arrived. You say returning the patch didn't seem appropriate all by itself. So you wore the fire department patch in combat, correct?
Yes.
And then you brought it back with a unit coin and you bid this nice little thing for him. So what is the background of this photo and then how this kind of all came together?
Well, you did a great job explaining what it all was and kind of how it came to be, but there were this box of patches that showed up, and I was coming back from running our selection course right after September 11th, and I showed up and I saw this box and looked in the box, and there are all these FDNY patches. So you could see they still had like the blue threads from where they had cut them off of people's uniforms, and some of them had phrases, die mother, rot in hell, hope you burn in hell. Some of them had names, and I kind of got the gist of it was they want us to carry these forward. And, whether it's like, I don't think we would throw stuff out like death cards, but I think that was kind of in their idea of, so somebody somewhere knew somebody where I was, and they made this thing happen, but just kind of anonymously. I've never been able to get to the bottom of who sent it and all of that. So I had this patch with me, always like breast pocket, carried it around, had it on my, where all my personal items and stuff like that was always sitting there. And, it got to go be a part of a lot of historic stuff. And when there were some unique circumstances that happened where my patch had a name on the back. And in 2005, September 11th, they had family members of those that were killed, reading the names of those who had passed away. And I'm on my treadmill at home and running, and I see this beautiful blonde woman, and she says the name that was on the patch that I had. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. And that was what started kind of the quest of like, well, who was this guy? I didn't know that he was necessarily a person that was killed. Maybe it was just a fireman that wanted his name, to be carried forward, whatever it might be. So anyway, I did some research, found out where he was stationed, read about him. And as I was reading about him, it was almost as if I was reading about myself. And, dude loved to wear flannel, and he was always the life of the party and liked to have a good time, loved animals, blah, blah, blah. So I felt like, man, I need to do something with this. I can't go be public, like let's have a news crew there and, hey, here I am. I'm an active member of an organization and, don't want to talk about that. So I asked a buddy of mine who was in New York, hey, the next time I'm up, whenever that is, can we go by this place? And, I just want to drop this off super low key, be in and out. And, they can do with it whatever they want. They can give it to his family. They can, any of that stuff. So it kind of things transpired from there. But anyway, that's kind of how it went. So I thought, okay, I don't want to just take this back and be like, hey, I'm returning this patch. I've got to do something with it. And just putting it in a frame by itself didn't seem appropriate. So I took one of the assault flags off of my assault vest and put it in there. And then I thought, okay, I went and took it to somebody who could do that. And they were like, what about a coin? What if we put a challenge coin? And I was like, yeah, I'll get a unit coin and put that in there too. And that's what I did. So it's just this beautiful, very powerful both sides represented. My real intent in returning the patch to the firehouse was to let the firemen know, like, my brothers are over there right now shellacking dudes because of what happened September 11th. So this was at a time when politically, it was, why are we there? Oh, this is like an oil thing. Someone's politically got an agenda that, well, wait, we all voted for going to war over there. And now all of a sudden we're questioning it when it starts to have a human toll. And so the news was every day, 3 more guys were killed today, and questioning why we were there and all of that. And I wanted the firemen to know that we got your back because of what happened. We haven't forgotten. Doesn't matter if everybody else in America forgot, we didn't forget, and we got you.
Wow. I'm speechless. I could clip that and spread it, and that doesn't make you proud to be an American. I don't know what will. Did they say anything specifically to you when you presented it to them?
Well, that kind of turned into a whole other thing. Like, the guy that took me over there the night before, he starts telling me, like, hey, we're gonna go there tomorrow. Like, okay, cool. We're gonna go at 10 a.m. because all the guys coming in on the morning shift will be there, and everybody leaving from the night shift will be there. So it'll be a full house. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be up there, speaking in front of a group of people. Like, I have nothing prepared. This isn't what I wanted to do. And anyway, it kind of transpired to, like, well, the family's going to be there too. And like, dude, you were putting so much pressure on me. Like, I don't want to do this. So anyway, that was kind of how it rolled out. So at some point, I was being as benign as I could possibly be, hey, here's this thing, there was a whole lot of explaining about, like, is this guy in the army? What is this guy? Like, nobody really understood. I can say that, after what I told them, that, I don't think there were too many dry eyes in the firehouse. So it was a powerful life moment.
Wow.
It
Yeah, and for those of you who can see the photo, you can flip through it on your screen. It's an awesome photo. When I sent it over to Brad in the email, I put in parentheses, I think this whole story is incredible, and the story you just told even beat the one you shared on Instagram. So that's really cool and a classy gesture without a doubt. Next one, you're rocking a thick goatee. I think you're wearing Oakley's. You're throwing up a peace sign, and you're in some kind of vehicle, and it says AR-670-1 standard ? Hump day at band camp, and the geotag location is your mom's house. Do you know what this photo's from?
I know where I was. I don't want to disclose where I was, but
Okay.
it's one of those things where, you're kind of out there and you're doing your own thing. And I think that's the Serb victory symbol. I was always fond of that from the Bosnia Croat Serbian war that happened in the mid 90s. So anyway, it was just kind of, I had been called out on social media about, I'm a poser and this is, stolen valor because your flag is out of regulation and some other things like that. So I think this was kind of in response to some of that stuff where, I lived AR-670-1, which is like the Army regulation for proper military courtesies and customs and uniform wear and all of that stuff. And you don't necessarily have to be that to be a good soldier. And, it's meant to kind of show, I guess, ambiguity and all of that is something that you can use to your advantage, I guess.
Very neat. I love the geotag location's pretty funny. And I saw the Instagram post where that guy messaged you when I was scrolling your Instagram. It was like, he said, what was your unit? What was your MOS? Your flag's wrong.
Yeah. What's your MOS? And I responded to him like, I was in 12th group, some bogus crap. But he messaged me. So I didn't see that message for almost 18 months. It sat in some, I don't know Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I didn't know how Facebook worked. I started a Facebook page because it was the only way you could pay for advertising on Instagram. And so I was doing like band advertisements and, at least promoting stuff monetarily that way. And so I had to stand up a Facebook page to do it. So anyway, there were all this message stuff. Like, I don't look at the Facebook thing. I hate Facebook, not a fan of it, whatever. And I figured out that they're like, oh, there are all these message requests that I can't see in the messages from actual friends. And that's where this guy had called me out. So I screenshot that and then I posted it. Well, he messaged me after I post the thing, saying, hey, this guy, says, hey, I'm stolen valor and all that. He sends me another message that I don't see that says, turn your people off. I got the point. This is harassment. If you don't tell your people that, like, I didn't tell anybody to do anything. And I blurred his account. So like they couldn't even, but people were hard at work, finding who this guy was and found him and started harassing him. So
well,
anyway.
everyone's a tough guy on the internet until, people, decide to respond. And then all of a sudden it's not funny anymore to them. They don't, they don't want to talk at the same level all of a sudden. Yeah. All right. This one, I picked it because the caption's just frankly funny. And it's also geotagged your mom's house. It says balls deep, as we used to say, long before it was a popular term. The meaning to us referred to how far into bad guy territory we were. These are a few pics from that day and also a pic of us getting ready to go. We lost a mate on this day, Andy Fernandez. Although he was brand new to the unit, he had just been assigned, he left his mark and will forever be etched into historic endeavors. R.I.P. Andy. So I know you probably can't get into specifics. The caption's hilarious, the top half of it anyways. But yeah. Are you able to say anything about what this Instagram post is in relation to?
That was post gunfight. I think it's been talked about in some book, someplace. So I don't read any military history stuff. So I don't know. People will send me things sometimes where like, oh, this must be from this book that so-and-so wrote about. Like, I don't know. It was kind of post gunfight. We were outnumbered and surrounded by, 130, 150 dudes and had, at least beat everybody back enough that, that was kind of that moment when that picture was taken. So we didn't necessarily know at the time, like, it was any gunfight is a scary moment and, you don't really necessarily know the outcome, but it was almost, for me and where I was, it was almost a fun gunfight. Like, they couldn't hit me where I was and they couldn't hit my group where we were based on the terrain. And so we were almost kind of laughing, running back and forth, shooting at these guys over here, go grab some more ammo, go shoot at these guys over here. And so it wasn't, a terrifying moment. It turned into not to be a terrifying moment. But then we started hearing radio calls, hey, we got some people hit and injured, and okay, well, now this is a serious thing. It's not a funny thing anymore. And if anything, the post kind of reflects that, where, right. Initially, hey, haha, fun. This was, a good day. And then, somebody paid the ultimate price that day. And but that's about as much as I can say.
And for those of you listening to this, that day has been discussed on other interviews I've done as well. So if you're interested, you can check that out. Jesse Betcher briefly spoke about it as well. So thanks for giving the background on that. We got 2 photos left. This one, I think you guys are outside of maybe a mini bird. I can't tell. Yeah, it's a mini bird for sure. It says it's you, Chili Palmer, Chris. The guy on the right has his face blacked out, and the pilots are ready to go. And it says, one time at band camp, about to deliver some hate. Thanks, Chris Van Zandt, for the pick. Never seen this before right now. And then hashtag effing wear a shirt. What's going on? I censored that, but what's going on with this?
Yeah, I think it was summertime and, very warm out. So we were rolling around in, very non-standard-y t-shirt. I think I'm wearing a t-shirt in that picture. Or a couple of us are wearing t-shirts in that picture. And it's, I guess, not the intent of the post, but like you do what's required, you know, and if it means not wearing a military blouse, conducting a military operation, like we were flexible enough to be able to kind of tailor what we did, where we did it. And I don't know, but that was a moment where it's like, it's cool to see something, another example of an artifact that somebody else has, that it's like, I've never seen this before. So, you know, super cool to that many years later, like, wow, okay, we're all like, you know, we're having a good time in that photo, you know?
It's a really cool photo, and this is the last photo, and it's actually going to be a perfect segue to Silence and Light. It's a photo of Ozzy Osbourne. He's got a Black Sabbath War Pigs patch. He's pointing to it, and he says, "I took this pic of Ozzy Osbourne backstage before the Black Sabbath show at Jones Beach Amphitheater. The patch had been worn on Target," which is really interesting, "along with several others that were given to the whole band. You tag a guy, Geezer Butler actually spotted this for the show, which was amazing to see. Ozzy is a gracious human being, as is Sharon Osbourne, great people, and love spending time with them." So what's up with the whole Ozzy Osbourne Black Sabbath patch?
Let's see. So I can't really talk about who wore that where.
Okay.
But it was given to me. There were 4 or 5 of them that were given to me. And I'm friends with Jack Osbourne, who kind of made the connection happen. So he was like, "Oh man, you know, Dad and Mom know about you. I've talked about you." Had invited me to dinner at their place a number of times when I was out in California, and I could never, as bad as it sounds, I had other stuff that I was doing and literally couldn't go over to Ozzy and Sharon's. And, you know, he was a music hero to me. You know, Black Sabbath was probably one of my favorite bands growing up. So, you know, to have to literally turn down like, "Hey, Sharon, I can't come over for steak with you and Ozzy because I got other stuff I got to do." But, you know, anyway, that's what happened. So I had, for probably 2013 to whenever that picture was taken, I want to say it was 2017, maybe. Jack just kept trying to make the link up happen, you know, "Hey, they're going to be here. Are you going to be anywhere near?" And it just couldn't happen. So, anyway, brought these patches and, some friends with me, and, you know, got to hang with Oz and Sharon for, you know, probably a good hour. And, you know, incredibly gracious people. They didn't have to take the time, you know, they're about to play a show and everything else. And, you know, but really were thoughtful, considerate, really nice people that took the time to kind of listen to what I had to say. And, you know, being able to tell Ozzy, like, "Dude, your music is like coursing through my veins when I'm over here doing these things. And you don't know how awesome that is. Like, we're not worthy." You know, literally that moment. And I'm not a starstruck person. I've got a lot of friends that are pretty well known, and I don't know, but being around him was completely different. It was like, all right, well, I got to take a picture. So anyway, I handed him the patches, and he was gracious enough to give them to everybody else in the band. And their bass player, Geezer Butler, had his sewn onto his shirt for the night. So he wore it up on stage for the whole show. And we're like, dude, 15-year-old Brad would like literally shit his pants if he knew that like you gave something to Ozzy, who gave it to Geezer Butler, who wore it during the show. You know, it just couldn't, it's a very surreal moment. That picture though of Ozzy. So I said, "Hey, Oz, do me a huge favor, man." We took some pictures together and stuff like that, but can you hold this patch so that I can take a picture of it and send it to the person that it came from? And he's like, "Absolutely." So he's holding it, you know, whatever he's doing. And I've also got the first, like, I just was boom, 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 taking, you know, as many pictures as I could. And originally it was upside down. And so I'm like taking pictures, turning it in his hand like this. And he's just holding it the whole time, you know, doing the Ozzy face. And it's like, okay, there we go. And anyway, it was just one of those moments where you're like, dude, this is an amazing night. And yeah, powerful moment for me, and kind of full circle on the whole music, combat, everything thing.
Well, now we're going to get into the question I know you cannot wait to answer. I get dogged all the time because I interview a lot of Army guys. I ask them the exact question I'm about to ask you. And everyone on YouTube's like, why do you only ask guys from Delta Force this question? Well, I interview more of them than SEAL Team 6. That's why. I'm not biased. I'll post any video clip of anything anyone says. So now we have another SEAL Team 6 guy in front of us. SEAL Team 6 versus Delta Force. It is literally the most popular video subject on YouTube for any military category. You can look up the numbers. That's 100% true.
Yeah.
Delta guys obviously claim they're the best. SEAL Team 6 guys obviously claim they're the best. What is your opinion on Delta Force versus SEAL Team 6? Who's better? And then what would you say the big differences are?
So I'm so honored to answer this question with you. But yeah, we're better. Duh. No, honestly, my opinion about that is it's like you like football. It's like the NFL to me. It's just stuff and it doesn't fucking matter. So here, who's better right now, Dave? The Kansas City Chiefs or the Patriots? Who's better?
Chiefs are currently much better.
Aren't they both elite NFL? And they're both tier 1 NFL teams. But who's won the most Super Bowls?
Patriots.
So who's better? Like there might be a time where they were better, and it depended on like their support, who all the individuals will support, their leaders, like their coaches, right? Their staff. Different teams have different amounts of money at any given time. The commissioner might favor one team or the other at some point. I don't know. There's just different factors, but like right now, the Chiefs are better, right? So it's the same shit, dude. So my answer is it's the same shit. Right? So the same shit with little differences in the way we do things at different points, little failures and wins at different levels, and it ebbs and flows, and it's all the brotherhood, and we're all in it. It's all part of us. And they're both tier 1 elite units. It's the same shit.
Did you ever do like a lot of cross training with those guys when you were in?
I didn't do a lot personally. I did a little bit though. And it's always those relationships that any of the ones that I've ever met them or they augmented us were always great, dude. That's where the friendships form. That's where the bonds form. I met some of my closest Delta buddy in a course, in a tandem bundle course, which was really hard for me. I really struggled through that, and he actually pulled me through it. Like I wouldn't have made it without him. He was my partner. So and now I'm friends with some guys that are out doing training stuff and things like that, and we're it's super awesome. So
is it, and this is just a pure nerd question because I'm a nerd and I'm fascinated by history and stuff like this. If I took a dude from Delta and I swapped him into like a CQB stack of like SEAL Team 6 guys, or I took a guy from SEAL Team 6, threw him in a stack of a bunch of Delta dudes, is the CQB like essentially the exact same? Like you wouldn't even know that one guy was from the other side?
I think so. When you do CQB that much, you on night vision and everything, like you learn what everybody in your team does just by how you don't talk, just what they look like, and like the moves that I know what this guy's going to do because he always does this. It's like, their body language, you know what they're going to do. It's fluid, right? When it gets to that zone, when you're in that zone together. But so the answer to that is like, yes. And like in like a couple of runs, and especially after talking through what they do, what each does differently, whoever you flop into it in like 10 minutes is going to just shift to that. And because it's an art form, it's fluid, and they're going to run with them, dude. That's that CQB, that high level CQB.
Well, I have to say, I was texting you kind of about the things I've noticed as like an outside observer, just getting to know these two groups of people. There, to me, are some interesting kind of cultural differences in the dudes. Like the SEAL Team 6 guys always seem significantly more laid back. They kind of lean into like the kind of like the tattoos, like the SEAL vibe, like that's there, like from all the guys I've interviewed, like that is part of the persona. Like I don't want to say Hollywood gets it right, but like that's very real. The Delta dudes are more, in my personal experience, it's like, I don't know if this guy should be teaching like high school history or like being an accountant, and they're like 5 foot, they're like 5'5".
Yeah.
And that's not negative. I'm not saying anything negative. I love both those dudes, but now people on YouTube can stop screaming at me. We now have another SEAL Team 6 opinion. And so there you go. We got it on record. Chris has it on the record. We're going to get this out as a special clip so everyone can stop screaming at me about being unfair. Are we all in agreement?
Yeah. No, dude, those are generalizations. I don't know that many Delta guys that aren't big fucking beasts of dudes with tattoos,
I think what changed is if you look at the timeline, like if you look at the guys in Delta from like the 90s and the early 2000s, like guys that were in before GWAT started and then were in the early days of GWAT.
Yeah.
They look significant. The team photos, not to get too nerdy here. You look at the team photos of them and you look at the team photos of like Kyle Morgan or like dudes from that time period. They don't look like they're even in the same group. That is 100% correct when it comes to being tattooed and much bigger. I guess that's just how things change over time, right?
They change over time, dude. I have some close buddies that you would never know. They look like librarians from DEVGRU. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
It just depends. Each of the 4 teams within the unit all have their own over time little nuances and differences too. You know what I mean? Like, I never knew another squadron to have, so many like ginger redheads in their team than red. So I guess it was fitting, but, we've got a lot of mine had more guys from different ethnic backgrounds. You know what I mean? Like a lot of like Asian, Hispanic, black, white, whatever, and maybe one team had a bunch of dudes that look like librarians, so it just changes and flows over time through the drafts and everything like that. But like I said, I feel like it's the same. If you got a group of those guys in their what they wear every day and a group of those guys what they wear every day, like not uniforms, but you wouldn't know the difference.
I love this. This is gonna fly. Speaking of the tier 1, and this is something again, you and I, for the viewers, you can tell Chris and I text back and forth occasionally from time to time. People, there have been many examples brought to my attention from people I've interviewed about people who essentially exaggerate or outright lie.
There's been many cool things. I mean, I think that's one of the one of the many highlights of my career was just being around good guys, right? Being around guys who, the caliber of which is just like every guy there is like that guy. Like, man, this is just like the best dude that you could possibly think of having. I don't know, one of the missions that I think about, I don't know, would have been late, maybe 07-ish. But just we'd walked a long ways in. It was down in Kandahar area. Walked a long ways in, knew, I think it was a 10K walk to get to the target. We knew the bad guys, knew that we were in the vicinity because we'd taken helos in, but they didn't know where we were. So it was a good route in, and my team was responsible for the route in. So that was, that's always a good feeling. Then we got on target and it was pretty sporty. At one point we were taking fire from 3 different cardinal directions. AC 130 was, and this is before I was wearing, I wasn't wearing headphones. I was wearing what we called the bone phones. Cause the initial, like Peltors, they didn't give you very good directional. So I was like, who cares if I save my hearing and then end up dying in the process. So I was not wearing hearing protection during this stuff. And I remember the AC 130s going hot with their 105s, and they were so close, it was hurting my ears, the 105s. So it was a good, exciting time on target. And then leaving, I mean, we walked for a ways. We ended up extracting it at dawn, which was, I thought at the time was a mistake, just because as we took off, I just remember tracer fire just raining up, and it looked like it was going through the helo that was behind us, through one of the 47s. I just remember praying and just seeing that tracer fire come up, and then just the mini, the door gunners just just raking these compounds, and just a pretty cool moment. We didn't get anyone hurt on that mission. It was a pretty it was one that we talked about a lot of times afterwards, that like that could have gone significantly differently. So yeah, and I mean, and that's one of many different super cool times of just, yeah, there many times, but other stuff I'm not going to talk about. But yeah, just it's, I mean, to be a part of an organization like that, and to be able to do, I mean, that was what I wanted to do since being a kid. Go and do cool commando stuff. And so to go and actually be able to do that stuff, and to do it with good friends, and what a blessing. What a cool thing to be able to do.